Cultfigga TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yamin of Revolution. 1 million Iranian soldiers are prepared to fight the U.S. Marines. U.S. is not ready for this drone warfare. Before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. We're a revolutionist for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I got some revolutionary dinner for y'all. It's looking real bad for the U.S. Let's get right into the content. Salute, soldiers.
We now have some new updates out of Iran, with Iran touting that they are more than capable of supplying 1 million fighters to the front lines anywhere needed within the country.
You know who can't supply 1 million soldiers to anywhere near the front line? The U.S., Israel.
Especially if the United States decides they're going to send troops in, or ground troops, to take any part. Now, there's been talk that Trump has pushed back this whole deadline 10 days, but we've got Marines heading to the area, some 7,000 additional U.S. troops, mainly Marines.
7,000.
You also have in there airborne troops, 82nd Airborne. And it doesn't matter who you talk to or listen to on the situation. Karg Island is not going to be an easy task to go in and just take over. Even if they do drop in, they're saying that the Iranians are ruthless, that once you're in there on their territory, they'll do anything, kamikaze style, to take us out, including setting booby traps all across the island that could ignite the entire thing. They're ready to do anything, they're saying. So 1 million soldiers mobilized, they're saying right now, for this force. So we've got a big mass heading in that direction. There was said to be 50 to 60,000 troops stationed amongst all these bases in the area. But when they started firing missiles everywhere, the U.S. pulled their troops out of most of those close bases to different locations. So what they're going to do in the coming week, obviously yet to be seen, but it's going to be interesting because it seems Trump's using all this talk time to reposition. And as soon as they get into position, they strike. This time, it's not just going to be striking with missiles and walking away, it seems. They're prepared for a ground invasion. So where this goes, we're just going to have to wait and see. Energy prices and all that surely going to fluctuate if this goes down. Now, join me for the live stream, going live Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern.
Revolutionary salute. Iran is finna teach these boys, though, a military lesson that the world gonna talk about 1,000 years from now.
Donald Trump is panicking as Iran says it is preparing 1 million troops if the United States invades the Karg Islands or anywhere else in Iran. Now, Donald Trump has immediately responded by claiming he is entering into further fake negotiations.
Nothing, boy. You know how many people? You know how many people in Iran want to get their motherfucking hands on the great Satan and the little Satan? 1 million. That's just the first. That's just the first wave. While Trump talking about, I got 5,000 soldiers. I got 3 million people. Man, what? That's it. That's all you. So is that all that you send to Mr. President?
Negotiations with Iran, which Iran has immediately denied. But Donald Trump made this statement as the markets here in the United States are crashing. And so again, Donald Trump has tried to manipulate the market, but it seems the market is getting numb to all of his lies, where he'll make up something, then Iran, whether it's to the Wall Street Journal or through an intermediary or through Dropsite or through another, the Financial Times, will just say absolutely everything that Donald Trump is saying is not true. Let's just go through the events here. So Iran says, if you invade, we have more than 1 million fighters who are preparing for a ground battle. And Iran put that out through Tasman News Agency, citing their own Iranian military sources. Then Donald Trump posts, as per Iranian government request, please let this statement serve to represent that I am pausing the period of energy plant destruction. By the way, that's a war crime. By 10 days to Monday, April 6, 2026 at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Talks are ongoing, and despite erroneous statements to the contrary by the fake news media and others, they are going very well. Thank you for your attention to this matter, Donald J. Trump. So instinctively, we knew that Donald Trump was lying because everything that spews out of his mouth and vomits out of his face is an absolute lie. And then shortly thereafter, we heard from Iranian officials who said the following. Senior Iranian officials told Dropsite News that U.S. President Donald Trump was not being truthful in his post earlier on Truth Social, announcing an additional 5-day pause on his threat to bomb Iranian energy infrastructure at the request of Iran, with the official stating, Trump is not being truthful. We have not submitted any request regarding potential U.S. attacks. Now, you might be saying, well, that's a senior Iranian official, and they're saying that to Dropsite. Maybe that's a lie. Maybe they're not telling the truth. Well, then one of the individuals trying to be a mediator, I think probably from Pakistan, that the U.S. is trying to use to engage with Iran, then went to the Wall Street Journal and made it very clear Iran hasn't requested a pause on energy, cite strikes, the mediator says. So the same way that the former mediator, the foreign minister of Oman, basically said that the United States and Israel acted in a way that was inconsistent with the negotiations, where there was a deal that was reached in late February and that there were just technical details that needed to follow. But then the U.S. and Israel invaded Iran when there was a deal to be had. You're having the new mediator, likely from Pakistan, but it's unclear from where.
This season, you've got places to go, people to see, and things to do. You may have already gotten vaccinated for flu and COVID-19.
Telling the Wall Street Journal and others that what Donald Trump is saying is an absolute lie. Iran has not requested a 10-day pause on strikes on its energy plants and is yet to deliver a final response to the U.S. 15-point plan to end the war, according to, quote, peace talk mediators. This was reported by Wall Street Journal. But what we do know from this article is that Iran has ruled out discussing its missiles program as a starting point to talks and doesn't want to commit to ending enrichment of uranium forever, the mediators say. So don't even talk to us about dismantling our Shaheeds, our ballistic missiles of any range, intermediate or otherwise. We're not even going to have that conversation with you. And we want to enrich uranium. We saw what you did when you invaded us the last time. So we don't trust you. That's what Iran is saying. So Iran has already rejected the 15-point plan through the mediator. And then before that, you had senior Iranian officials basically saying no plan for talks appears to be realistic at this stage. So Iran says no plan for talks because there's no realistic view by the United States. Donald Trump sees the markets crashing yet again. Donald Trump lies and then says we've agreed to a 5-day period where we won't be doing war crimes by bombing the energy infrastructure. Iran responds, we're not asking for this. You're just making up, again, fake negotiations layered on fake negotiations. Now, Israel's Channel 14 reports that Iranian officials have always believed that ongoing negotiations now are a American intelligence op aimed at gathering precise information about leadership locations and decision-making centers. The report adds that this concern has led Tehran to avoid electronic communications and instead to rely on field intermediaries to manage sensitive contacts. Now, it should also be noted that Iran's military is releasing a video showing a message being placed on a missile ahead of launch, the latest in a series of such clips. These photos either reference Jeffrey Epstein or Trump being part of the Epstein class, or have photos of American soldiers coming home in American flag draped caskets. Analysts say this tactic, you see it right here, play the B-roll, everybody, say the tactic reflects a broader effort to shape the narrative during the conflict. And what Iran is saying, however, first and foremost, we're not doing a deal. If you want to talk to us, don't even mention ballistic missiles or that we can never enrich uranium. Those aren't starting points. We've seen you in the United States, your military evacuating and abandoning the 13 military bases in the Middle East because of our Shahed and FPV drone swarms. We're being assisted by Russia while you lift sanctions against us and Russia. Iran is feeling emboldened right now, if anything. And so what Iran is signaling, though, is that they've got a, quote, special and unprecedented plan for the UAE and Bahrain. Iran's IRGC-linked Fars new agency, IRGC is the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. This is their state regime. Fars new agency cites an informed military source, reports that Tehran has prepared special and unprecedented measures against the UAE and Bahrain in the event of any ground attack on Iranian islands in the Persian Gulf. The warning follows U.S. threats of a ground operation and alleged support from these Gulf states, including hosting bases.
Iran can invade Bahrain and UAE whenever they get ready. And once the U.S. try to do any ground invasion, then they can justify seizing that territory.
And providing infrastructure and advanced technologies. Tehran said any response would be very damaging and instructive. And specifically, this infographic being circulated by Iranian media outlines key energy infrastructure across the UAE, drop site reports, including power stations, nuclear facilities, and solar hubs as potential targets in the event of escalation. Key sites being identified are desalination complex in Dubai, nuclear power plants and power stations in Abu Dhabi, other power plants in Dubai, and solar parks in Dubai and similar facilities in Bahrain. The report claims that strikes on these sites could trigger widespread blackouts and disrupt desalination industry and data centers with cascading effects on UAE's economy and regional trade. Experts cited in the report say the country's heavy reliance on centralized power infrastructure make these sites strategically critical. Also, Iran is now officially designating the Four Seasons and Sheraton hotels, as well as the presidential palace in Syria's capital, Damascus, as military targets, claiming the presence of American, Israeli, and British experts inside these locations make them fair targets to strike. Meanwhile, you have Foreign Minister of Iran, Araghchi, posting the following: the wise stances of the great religious authorities, the government, and the Iraqi people must be commended in condemning the aggression of America and the Zionist entities, in standing alongside Iran, its government, and people in confronting this aggression. Your offering of condolences for the martyrdom of the leader of the revolution reflects the depth of the strong ties between the two peoples, for in times of hardship, true brothers are known. So the Iraqi government has now authorized its Shiite militias to attack American military bases in surrounding Arab nations, as well as in Iraq. So in essence, Iraq has now joined the war, which they have for some time, though, shoulder to shoulder with Iran. Iraq and Iran together targeting American bases. And we've seen these FPV, first-person viewing drones, by these Shiite militias who get a lot of resources from Iran, who in turn gets a lot of resources from Russia, using it to strike Blackhawks and radars and others in American military bases with relative impunity. And we see those drone swarms moving around with those cameras that we have.
All right, you hear that? That's the sound of me opening an Olipop. And I've got to say, this has completely replaced traditional soda for me. Olipop is a new kind of soda that combines the...
Writes President Putin.
Oh, were you waiting for that box to hit me? I was waiting for you to treat your athlete's foot with low treat.
Message and the support of the Russian people inspire us in this war. The resistance and the courage of the Iranian people promise new bonds that will ensure the security of East Asia by the countries of the region. On behalf of the people of Iran, I thank the government and people of Russia. We know that Russia is providing Iran with substantial military support, with more drones, with component parts, with active military intelligence, while Donald Trump continues to attack Ukraine and suck up to Putin, removing sanctions against Russian oil, removing sanctions against Iranian oil, removing sanctions against Belarus, helping Russia make the money to make the military weapons to attack Ukraine and to hand to Iran to attack American soldiers. You also have MB Ghalibaf, the head of Iran's parliament, mocking Pete Hegseth's comment where Hegseth said during that deranged cabinet meeting earlier today, for years, Iran told the world their missiles could only range 2 kilometers. Surprise, yet again, Iran lied. Ghalibaf posts this meme of a little child looking at Pete Hegseth like he's crazy. Iran continues to mock Donald Trump, his regime, and the United States. Never before has the United States been weaker. Also, Iran is tightening control over the Strait of Hormuz, forcing ships to share detailed data, reroute into the waters, and sometimes pay for passage, creating what analysts call a toll booth system, the AP is reporting. And Scott McFarlane, who has recently joined the Midas Touch Network as our chief Washington, D.C. correspondent, he also runs at Scott McFarlane News. He has his own YouTube site. Go check it out. Search at Scott McFarlane News. Let's help him get 250,000 subscribers soon. He's interviewed numerous people on the Hill who say it's a bad effing idea, a terrible effing idea. Congress is losing its patience with the briefings. It's getting about Iran. All of this is a bad idea by Donald Trump. And other sources say that Donald Trump appears to be leaning towards ordering this major ground operation against Iran as he continues to say that he's negotiating 5-day ceasefire deals or whatever he's saying regarding their energy infrastructure, which he's not doing. And lots of people see the buildup with the Marine Expeditionary Units, the 82nd Airborne Division, the Special Operations Unit, Navy Special Operations Unit. By the way, Trump and Hegseth fired the Navy Special Ops former commander, which is significant because now they're without one of their top people. But with all of the assets, people believe that this invasion of Iran and Kurd can be imminent, in which case we expect to see all hell breaking loose and all-out war in the Middle East. Still, Donald Trump gets his briefings via 2-minute clips that are being curated to him by officials that show the U.S. and Israel blowing up things in Iran, and that's how Donald Trump is getting it through these hype videos, which again is deeply concerning that that's how Donald Trump is getting his news. With all of this going on, Donald Trump, as I mentioned, has lifted sanctions against Belarus as well, a Russian proxy. Donald Trump is sending J.D. Vance to try to lift up Viktor Orban in the next week, right before the big elections are set to take place in Hungary, where the pro-democracy party is expected to beat Orban, but Trump and Putin doing everything that they can to prop up Hungary right now. Aragchi also just posted, from the outset of this war, U.S. soldiers fled military bases in Gulf countries to hide in hotels and offices. They use Gulf country citizens as human shields. Hotels in U.S. denied bookings to officers who may endanger customers. GCC, Gulf country hotels should do the same as well. Also, these hardliners in Iran right now are saying, we need nuclear weapons in Iran. Never negotiate with America again. We want our nuclear weapons right now. And this, as we're learning more and more how the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps faction within Iran, the military is asserting a lot more power right now in this war, whereas maybe more of the power was in the Ayatollah before, but they had this mosaic, decentralized style of leadership, but we're seeing even a more assertive than before IRGC, as Iran, as I noted before, designating Four-Season Sheraton hotels in the palace in Syrian capital, Damascus, as valid military targets. I did the cabinet meeting that Donald Trump was held. It was that deranged cabinet meeting. Watch the whole thing where I show what happened in his cabinet meeting. But with everything that I'm telling you, Donald Trump was saying like, oh, people are saying this is a disaster, or I think things are going great. Here, play this clip.
The Iranian regime is now admitting to itself that they have been decisively defeated. They're saying to people, this is a disaster. They know it. That's why they're talking to us. They wouldn't talk otherwise.
This is crazy.
But they're talking to us because they've got a disaster on their hands. They're defeated. They can't make a comeback. We're free to roam over there.
And then Donald Trump starts saying, like, we're beating the shit out of Iran. We're beating the shit out of them. Here, play this clip.
The reason they want to make a deal is they have been just beat to shit.
So are you thinking of taking control of Iran's oil?
It's an option. I mean, I wouldn't talk about it, but it's an option.
Is that something you thought about?
Well, in Venezuela, we've done very well working with Venezuela, certainly. And we've taken in billions and billions of dollars. And by the way, Venezuela is doing better right now than they've ever done in the history of their country.
Okay, we're not. Let's be very clear what's really happening. I laid it out in this video. That's the truth. Do what you want with the truth. But let's just start with the objective reality of what's happening. Everybody hit subscribe. Let's get to 7 million subscribers. Thanks everybody for watching. We appreciate you. We're grateful.
Iran can terrorize these people with the bro. They better not land on no island, bro. I'm telling you right now.
This is not Iraq. This is not Afghanistan. A new battlefield is taking shape in the Middle East, and it looks like Ukraine. Iran-backed militias have released footage of fiber-optic FPV drones striking a US base in Baghdad, hitting a Black Hawk and radar system. This is the future of warfare, and it has arrived fast. This shift is not accidental. Iran is learning directly from Russia's war in Ukraine, where drones dominate the battlefield. From fiber-optic FPVs to coordinated strikes, Tehran is absorbing lessons from Moscow. What Russia refined in Europe's deadliest war in decades is now being prepared for a potential confrontation with the United States. As US troops move into the region, a serious concern is emerging. American forces may not be fully prepared for drone-dominated warfare. Unlike Ukraine, many US units lack widespread anti-drone systems. Fiber-optic drones cannot be jammed easily, turning troops and assets into vulnerable targets in a rapidly changing combat environment. The Strait of Hormuz could become the next flashpoint. This narrow waterway is critical for global oil supply and now faces a new threat. Naval drones and FPVs could strike ships in confined waters with high precision. Even less advanced systems could prove lethal here, raising the risk of disruption in one of the world's most strategic corridors. Despite these warning signs, adaptation within Western militaries appears slow. For years, advanced air power was seen as decisive, but Ukraine has changed that reality. The US is still in early stages of adapting to FPV warfare. In modern conflict, technological learning speed may define survival more than traditional military strength.
My friends, 2 days ago, an Iranian-backed militia in Iraq carried out a drone strike against a US Army helicopter.
We got a Black Hawk down, we got a Black Hawk down.
This comes only days after another FPV drone flew right over the US Embassy in Baghdad. That's not all, because check this out. This is reportedly an image of an Iranian soldier waiting on Karg Island for a potential US ground operation. But I want you to pay attention right here. There are two FPV drones sitting next to the AK. And let's just say American soldiers are not ready to be on the receiving end of drone strikes. Now imagine an elite battalion of 500 Iranians with two FPV drones each. Just think of the damage they can inflict. This is alarming for so many reasons. as more and more US ground forces are being redeployed to the Middle East. All I can say is that the US military is not ready for drone warfare. Yes, they can take an island, and then what? They're gonna be sitting ducks. The US population is absolutely not ready for drone kill cams of its troops, with close-ups of their frightened faces in a montage with funk music. But that's not all. They will also face all the Iranian long-range Shahed drones that have already proved so destructive against US bases.
Oh, okay.
When I look at all the footage coming from the Ukraine war, I'm really worried because US soldiers only have very little training in drone countermeasures. Yes, maybe the US military has relatively recent combat experience from Afghanistan and Iraq, but IDs are nothing compared to the lethality of FPV drones. Those are like flying IDs. I'm not a hater, I'm just being realistic. But before we continue, a quick word from today's sponsor. Ceremonial cocoa has 40 milligrams of flavonols. This powder, 1,200 steroids. And research proves it. You can look it up. Harvard studied the speak of an air assault against Karg Island. In my previous video, we already established that this is probably a PR stunt and just a facade for the public, and not the actual target of the US military. But then there are talks of storming various islands along the Strait of Hormuz. You know what? A couple months ago, battle-hardened Ukrainian special forces attempted an air assault against Pokrovsk. The moment they landed, the Russian recon drone was already circling right above their heads. And moments later, Russian FPV drones chased down this entire Spec-Ops rifle team you just saw, hunting them down one by one. Drones really changed the nature of warfare. And to this day, there's not really much you can do against them. Most of the doctrines and combat tactics of the Cold War, or just even 10 years ago, are now outdated and obsolete. Air assaults are so easy. We're gonna show them, these Iranians, how fighting is done.
You sure about that?
Look, I won't hide it. I'm very pessimistic about this entire ground offensive against Iran. The scary part is that many units in Iran's Revolutionary Guard have gone through advanced FPV drone training for 2 years now. 2 years! And they've probably been trained by Russian veterans. In some of the propaganda videos the IRGC published, we can observe that they fully implemented the lessons from the Ukraine war, with small units riding motorcycles and quads. Then they quickly disembark only to launch drones at the enemy in various types of scenarios. They're also training on how to hit naval targets. This is all far more advanced than what NATO forces are capable of at the moment. In February 2025, the IRGC announced the formation of a specialized drone detachment, while showing off all the drones they had available. Hopefully, it's all propaganda. Let's hope their drone units are not actually that advanced. Let's hope they don't have fiber optics drones. But hope is a habit US soldiers will soon have to unlearn. Imagine the Iranian military built various bunkers and underground positions at strategic locations. US troops might just unknowingly walk over them and then face surprise banzai attacks. Whoops, wrong island campaign. And then FPV drones will come flying out of nowhere, followed by this terrifying buzzing sound.
Life can change in an instant. In those moments, the ones you never see coming, you need more than just an emergency.
You know what? Many Ukrainian officers didn't want the US Army to intervene directly in its war against Russia because they feared American troops would suffer too many casualties due to their inexperience and their complete lack of knowledge in regards to drone warfare. But let's take a step back, because this current drone warfare crisis actually started on the 28th of February, right at the beginning of Operation Epic Fury. Remember this video from Bahrain, where we can observe a Shahed 136 drone plunging down and the guy recording is yelling, "Strike, strike, strike" in Arabic. And seconds later, boom, this radom is just exploding. A $30,000 Iranian drone destroyed a $300 million long-range 360 air surveillance and missile defense radar site. The next day on March 1st, it's US Camp Buring in Kuwait that was struck by a Shahed drone. And that same day, also in Kuwait, another long-distance Iranian drone targeted a US Army Reserve logistics unit in Port Shuaiba. This time, casualties were high, as 6 soldiers were reported KIA. The worst is that despite all the feedback we have from the Ukraine war, the hundreds of Shahed drones that the Russians are launching, no lessons were learned. The Washington Post declared that imagery shows US troops had little protection. They provide us with a picture stating, the trailer did not have any hardened protection above it to deflect or minimize the explosive force. And this is just the beginning. What do you think is going to happen when tens of thousands of US military personnel are going to be deployed in that same region? Especially when the New York Times stated, many of the 13 military bases in the region used by American troops are all but uninhabitable, with the ones in Kuwait, which is next door to Iran, suffering perhaps the most damage. If the situation is already pretty bad for US bases in the Gulf countries, it's a complete disaster in Iraq. Here on the 28th of February, a Shahed 107 drone launched by the Islamic Resistance targeted a US air defense system in Erbil. On the 6th of March, another US radar deployed in the vicinity of Baghdad International Airport was hit. That same day was special because it marked the first recorded combat use of FPV drones by the IRGC against electronic warfare equipment in Iraqi Kurdistan. Unfortunately, the video cuts before we know what happened. Footage is a bit blurry, no funk soundtrack, no crazy edits.
3.6, not great or terrible.
The Iranians still have a lot to learn. That's the only positive part of this entire video. 24 hours later, an American soldier recorded an Iranian drone strike on a US radar at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. At least there were some bunkers on the base. The problem is that the entire American air defense component was meant to destroy Iranian ballistic missiles. But there's barely anything to fend off small and low-cost FPV drones. As a reminder, on the night of the 12th of March, a Shahed-style drone struck a French base near Erbil in Iraqi Kurdistan. The attack caused the death of 42-year-old Chief Warrant Officer Arnaud Frion and wounded another 6 soldiers from the 7th Mountain Battalion. There's also this alleged footage from the drone strike. This would mean that just like the US troops in Kuwait, it's one of the barracks and sleeping quarters of the base that was struck at night. Can you imagine that one low-cost drone caused 7 casualties in one of France's most elite units? 2 days after this incident on the 14th, it's a radom within the US embassy that was destroyed by a drone. But yeah, the situation for US forces deployed in Iraq is catastrophic, where they're repeatedly targeted by small FPV drones. The next day, on the 15th of March, an FPV drone from the Iran-backed Iraqi Shia militia, Kataib Hezbollah, casually flew over the US Victory Base complex near the Baghdad airport for at least 2 entire minutes. The drone was just hanging around, looking at everything on the base before finding a hangar and crashing down. Very important to note, this drone pilot is a complete amateur. We can feel that he doesn't really know how to control the UAV, and in my opinion, he probably got lost above the base. Now imagine if the US actually faces guys that know what they're doing. Oh, and you thought I was done. On the 16th, another FPV drone from local Shia militias gave us a full tour of the green zone in Baghdad where the US embassy is located. If this is not worrying to you, I don't know what else to say. Anyway, no lessons were learned from US forces deployed in Iraq. And that's how on the 24th of March, another FPV drone flew over Victory Base. This time the drone spotted an AN MPQ-64 Sentinel radar system, because another one recorded the entire action from above. And we clearly see the explosion of the first drone, thus confirming the destruction of this very pricey radar system. This means at least 2 Iranian-backed FPV drones attacked the American base that day. That's when the pilot of the remaining drone spotted juicy targets in the distance, namely a parked Black Hawk helicopter. It's the same type of helicopter that Ukrainian special forces used during their air assault against Pokrovsk. My friends, the writing is on the wall. I mean, look at that. The 2 helicopters are just out there in the open. Zero protection whatsoever, not even some form of concealment. Now, this is not your regular UH-60 Black Hawk. It's a US Army HH-60M medical evacuation helicopter. We can see how the video editors blurred the red cross painted on the Black Hawk. Right now, thousands of American troops are converging towards the Middle East. The Wall Street Journal reported thousands of Marines to arrive in CENTCOM the same day as Trump's Iran deadline. The 11th and 31st Marine Expeditionary Units are on their way. Part of the 82nd Airborne was confirmed as being deployed to the region, thus confirming the rumors of the past few days. At last, according to flight logs and various rumors, multiple elite formations are also preparing for the invasion of Iran, like the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, Night Stalkers, the 75th Ranger Regiment, Delta Force, the 1st and 5th Special Forces Group, as well as Navy SEALs. This smells like some sort of air assault will take place, but we saw the vulnerability of helicopters in the age of drones. But that's not all. What happens once the infantry has disembarked? The worst case scenario would be for US combat units to panic and to lose cohesion as they get targeted by enemy drones. And it's not far-fetched. Look at this footage from Russian fiber optics drones just swarming Ukrainian rifle teams. There's literally no escape. These days, it's impossible for the infantry to maneuver on the battlefield in groups of more than 5 people. And it's not necessarily safer with armored vehicles, since they make bulky targets that are quickly engaged and then immobilized. A couple days ago, the Russians attempted mechanized attacks on Ukrainian positions. Most of the vehicles were destroyed or immobilized before even reaching the drop zone. We're witnessing a real tactical deadlock, the same type of deadlock armies faced during World War I with machine guns. This is going to be a hell of a baptism of fire for the 82nd Airborne and all the Marine units. The US Army is only teaching its men on how to manipulate drones in an offensive way as the attacker, but barely anything is done on how to defend against enemy UAVs. Madness. And even the little training they provide is years behind what is actually happening at the front in Ukraine. Most American weapons available are meant for large drones, but I haven't seen much training on what American infantrymen can do against small FPV drones. Yeah, sure, there's some target practice at the shooting range, some shotguns are being used. In this footage, we can see men of the 82nd Airborne manipulating UAVs. That's cool, but it's not enough. Or check this out. Yesterday, Business Insider posted this video titled, "How Army Soldiers Are Training for a Possible Trench War with Russia," where we see infantrymen getting lost in some German woods only to storm a trench in tight groups. Back to square one. So I repeat, the US military is not ready for drone warfare. I hope I'm wrong. Let's hope the Iranians don't have entire battalions of FPV drone operators. Let's hope that US forces have the right countermeasures. But looking at how poorly planned this entire operation is, I have the right to be extremely pessimistic. That's all I have for you today. See you in the next one.
bases in the region as it was warning, that it would close the Strait of Hormuz as it was warning. Well, we're now seeing Trump once again ignoring all of the warnings that putting US boots on the ground in Iran will be a disaster. You've got Marines on their way. You've got paratroopers on their way. And for what exactly? What is the end goal here? What is this quote unquote mission actually going to look like? And how embarrassing is it going to be for the US when they have not just hundreds, but thousands of American soldiers coming home in body bags? All of this as you have Iran continuing to fight back with capabilities that the US claims have been destroyed or simply don't exist. And what does all of this mean for the region and for countries like Russia and their support for Iran? Well, we got into all of that and more with a special guest earlier. So let's take a listen to that conversation now. Joining me now to discuss is international relations and security analyst Mark Sloboda. Mark, thanks so much for taking the time to join me.
Thanks for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on the show.
Always good to have you. Now, I want to get your take on the latest here, as I know reports are saying that around 2,000 paratroopers from the U.S. Army's 82nd Airborne Division have been sent to the Middle East for a potential ground invasion of Iran. This comes as an estimated 4,500 Marines are already en route. And now we have CNN reporting that Iran has been laying traps and moving additional military personnel and air defenses to Karg Island in recent weeks in preparation for a possible U.S. operation to try to take control of the island. Shocking, given that the Trump administration has been attacking that island, talking about that island, threatening it. I mean, the U.S. hasn't really made any of this a secret. So how do you view the current state of this war? And could we be looking at an attempt from the U.S. to launch a ground invasion into Iran?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it must be said that looks serious now, right? For the longest time, it was like, no, they're not stupid enough to do that. But it appears that they are, because we're now talking 2 Marine Expeditionary Units, the USS Tripoli, the USS San Diego. We're talking the 82nd Airborne, and then there's talk even further than that of Delta Force and perhaps 101st after that. You know, they're serious now. And there have been enough troop movements that this is not a joke. Now, I mean, there is the possibility that this is intended as some type of bluff. The U.S. is obviously, the conflict is not going the way they intended. They wanted a quick regime change, right? The New York Times confirmed, that which we already assumed, right? That they imagined that with decapitation strikes and CIA Mossad insurgency on the ground, that the people would rise up and throw off the government once it was done, right? Obviously, that didn't happen. And we also have been told that Trump didn't believe that Iran would close the Strait of Hormuz, even though his own intelligence and, I don't know, everyone's brother, including the guy down at the shawarma shop, knows that Iran would use their nuclear option of closing the Strait of Hormuz. And sure enough, they did. And then Trump evidently paid absolutely no attention to his military briefings and for some reason believed that the U.S. Navy would be able to quickly do something. And the U.S. Navy's like, no, we're not going in there. That's a chicken shoot, right? And then he tried to drag the other NATO countries and South Korea and Japan and Australia and everyone else. And they're all like, no, you got this. You're good, right? So it hasn't worked out too well. We're now several weeks with the Strait of Hormuz. It's not even closed. It's selectively closed for the West, right? For Israel, the U.S. and their allies. Meanwhile, China and India and Pakistan and anyone else who can shell up a couple $1 million because that's the toll fee now. And the IRGC is pocketing the money, and certainly, will be using it for the conflict. And now they seem to think, although I very much doubt it, that when this conflict is over, they will retain control of it and be able to charge fees like Egypt in the Suez Canal. And I mean, that's all kinds of problematic, but that will, I guess, be dealt with later. The U.S. has no easy way to force open the Strait of Hormuz. They have no easy way to end this conflict. They can keep dropping bombs, but it's not having the desired effect of getting rid of the Iranian government. And Iran is able to dish out as nearly as good as they're getting. And because it's not directly at the U.S., it's at the U.S.'s Gulf state Arab allies, their bases there, but also, of course, the energy infrastructure. And Iran is waging an asymmetric warfare against the United States here. And the goal of that is to make the global energy markets and thus the global economy scream until the U.S. and Israel stop. And obviously, Trump, if you pay any attention to his rants, I mean, they have been more unhinged and insane in the past few weeks than usual as he rants about the Strait of Hormuz and how completely he's destroyed Iran 10 times over by now, and then the great victory, and then but he's going to walk away, and everyone else should clean up the Strait of Hormuz, and he's moving troops, and they had better give him a ceasefire, right? He's demanding a deal. They have to accept his deal. It's sounding so desperate, so insane, and now we have ground troops, and this is going to be, as you know, many have pointed out, a Gallipoli level military disaster. When the U.S. sent troops into Iraq, that was upwards of 300,000, closer to 500,000 troops, and it took the U.S. about 8 months to build up that force. And for any sizable ground game, that is what the U.S. would require at a minimum, right? Iran, much bigger country than Iraq, much bigger population, much more unified and concerted around the government. We haven't seen, the U.S. has been unable to stir up the Iranian Kurds, the Baluchi, the Azeris. None of that has happened. Instead, there has been a rally around the flag effect. And if you want to talk topography, pull up a topographical map of Iran, and you'll see it's mostly mountains, right? It's not a fun geography, to invade and wage a war against. And the U.S. is talking about sending a few thousand troops in. Iran has a standing army of several 100,000, and then 1 million or so plus reserves on top of that. It's madness. Iran is not Venezuela. They will fight. And they keep talking up Harg Island. Okay, so Harg Island is at the north end of the Strait of Hormuz, which means to get there, you would have to run the gauntlet of the entire Strait of Hormuz with a long, winding Iranian coastline to get there, where you would be subject to drones, to anti-ship cruise missiles. You would be subject to fast attack boats, artillery even, right? It's a very bad, whether they tried to do it on the expeditionary unit ships, or even if they tried to use vertical takeoff craft off of the helicarriers that are part of that and fly in, they would still be under fire, right? It would be running a gauntlet. And then they get there. And Harg Island is a small little island. It has somewhere between 70 and 90% of Iran's oil export capacity is handled out of there. But it's kind of, there's no real permanent inhabitants, or not many, right? It's a flat little island. And where are you going to hide and shelter your troops when you've got them there? Because they'll be subject to artillery fire and drones and missiles, right? It will be very much like Snake Island in the Ukraine conflict, where Russia took that island very quickly, but they discovered that it wasn't so easy to hold, particularly once the U.S. provided the HIMARS system that could reach it from the Ukrainian mainland, and it just gave up and became a gray zone that no one permanently occupies because it's not worth it to hold it. Harg Island is a little bit like that. If you wanted to destroy all the oil infrastructure there, all right, that's feasible, and that would cause Iran a lot of damage. But trying to hold it is madness. It would just get troops killed. And there's some people that say that all of the talk of Harg Island, there's two things. They really seem to believe that if they seized it and held the oil infrastructure hostage, that the Iranian government would then just say surrender and say you won. Okay, I don't think that they will do that at all. If that's what the administration is thinking, then they're walking right into a trap. The other is that it's a bluff, and that they're making so much noise about it because the target is somewhere else. The thing about seizing Harg Island is, yes, you seize a lot of Iran's oil export capacity, but it's not actually going to force open the Strait of Hormuz. To do that, what you actually need to do is seize the Iranian coastline through the straits. We're talking the port city of Bandar Abbas, and the coastal area around it, and perhaps the larger populated island of Qim, rather than Harg Island. Maybe multiple targets. That would make more military sense. It would still be extremely difficult. Anything on the mainland is going to put yourselves straight up against the Iranian military. But on the other hand, that's also the area that has the large Baluchi ethnic minority, the Baluch ethnic minority, which the U.S. does hope that they could stir up against Iran. So there's possibilities there. But regardless, how are you going to keep these troops supplied with ammunition? How are you going to logistics? You can't provide them with solid air cover because Iran has too many drones and missiles. And, increasingly, Iran is showing the capability to at least damage even F-35s, F-18s. The U.S. does not have complete air superiority. And the Marines that are going in, they won't have heavy military equipment, right? These will be light infantry. It's a disaster. It's a disaster in the making. Now, saying that as someone who was once U.S. military, at a certain level, I'm horrified at the prospect for the troops. Saying as someone who immigrated to Russia and has dealt with that for the last 2 years, I'm like, yeah, you stupid SOBs, go for it. Because it would be such a disaster for them that they would have a serious problem, at least in geopolitical terms, hegemony is part belief, of recovering from that. That's how bad it would be.
Yeah, and especially as I'm watching these reports, I'm like, okay, you send paratroopers in, exactly as you said, they have a finite amount of resources and ammunition. So, how long are they going to survive? What are they actually going to accomplish? It just feels like we have all of these half-cooked plans that they now are making become a reality. And this also comes, as I thought it was notable that you have the New York Times admitting in a recent article with the title, "Iran's Attacks Force U.S. Troops to Work Remotely," that many of the 13 military bases in the region used by American troops are all but uninhabitable. So the U.S. wasn't prepared for Iran to close the Strait of Hormuz, even though they warned they would. They weren't prepared for Iran to attack U.S. military bases in the region, even though they warned that they would. What does this tell us about how the U.S. is handling this war, especially as the Trump administration seemed to think that they would just throw out a ceasefire deal, throw out 15 points, do what they're trying to do to Russia, and that Iran would hop on board, when in reality, they're saying not just no, but hell no to that offer?
Yeah, so we know that the U.S. military and that the intelligence reports told the Trump administration this, right? Dan Kane, it was quite clear Trump had to make weird posts about him saying he's fully on board, but he warned Trump that these things would happen and that it would be difficult. And it would not be a walk in the park regime change, not having a quisling like Delcy Rodriguez in Venezuela to simply hand the leader over in the country and roll over and play dead. And Trump evidently didn't want to believe this. And instead, he listened to Netanyahu, and he listened to his real estate buddy, Steve Witkoff, and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, whom a British diplomat recently characterized both of them as Israeli assets, right? And Netanyahu has been quite clear that he's been working 40 years towards getting the U.S. to fight this war against Iran for him. So, yeah, they were willing to tell them and everything. And Trump was given appropriate military advice and he ignored it. So it's only, I guess, tragic that it's not Trump who will suffer, except in the political sense from this, that it is those troops that will be placed in this impossible situation. And as to the specifics of the U.S. troops, that all of the U.S. military bases in the region have received extensive damage, that they're not able to work there because they keep getting hit, and that the U.S. troops.
So Dale, you really need to get that colon cancer screening.
Dad, it's been forever. I need to be.
Are conducting the war remotely from hotels and residences. What the New York Times didn't mention there is, and using civilians as human shields like that is literally a war crime, right? Because you're hiding in hotels, right? So that your troops don't get hit, where there are presumably other people who are not U.S. troops. And then we saw this, the first days of the conflict, right after the U.S. and Israel hit and Iran began their counterattacks, that hotels were being hit throughout the Middle East. And they're like, Iran's just hitting hotels in the Gulf and everything. And Iran was quietly explaining that's because there's U.S. troops there. And now that has all been fully admitted to and exposed, and it's not deniable. And yet, of course, there's still hand-wringing and waving. But the reality is that when they admit they're conducting the war remotely from these locations, then those locations are entirely legitimate military targets. Certainly the U.S. wouldn't hesitate to hit them if it was being done to them. So that is just another... You're right. It's a sign that they were completely unprepared. And it is hard to see why they are completely unprepared, because the U.S. military and the CIA that have quietly said, "Hey, we told them," and they chose to ignore, and that's the situation. So Trump is, he may be a petulant, puerile, overgrown man-child. He's also a grown man and the president of the United States, right? The commander-in-chief ultimately of the U.S. Armed Forces, and the buck stops there. He's singularly responsible for all of this, and that's probably part of the reason why he's so unhinged and flailing on his social media posts as foreign policy pronouncements.
Yeah, it's bizarre to watch, exactly as you're saying. I mean, every day he's like, we've already won the war in Iran, right? Their military capabilities are at 0%. And I'm like,
why don't they surrender?
Yeah.
Don't they realize how bad we've beaten them?
Well, like NBC News came out with an article saying, yeah, Trump is getting daily video briefings where they're showing him all of these successful strikes, and they can only be so long. So they kind of leave out a lot. They leave out all of the rest of the story. And I'm going, how sad is it? This is almost worse than even what we dealt with Zelensky, where there was a lot of talk that he was just surrounded by yes men, that he didn't know how bad the situation was on the battlefield. It's even worse with Trump now, and we're not even a month into this war yet. Like, it's just insane to watch. I did also want to bring up, because I know Bloomberg had a recent article admitting that what remains of Iran's vast missile arsenal, which of course the Trump administration is claiming was reduced by 90%, that what remains of it is being used more efficiently from hard to reach bases in eastern Iran. And we knew that the strategy from the start was to flood US, Israeli, their regional air defenses, so much so that they used up those interceptor missiles because they only had a finite supply of those. But how do you see the position that Iran is now in and its ability to continue this war, especially as it is causing a crisis for the U.S. and its vassal states? We also have Hezbollah now in here, right, waging a direct war on Israel over the border, launching some impressive ambush-style attacks. I mean, Iran is not alone here. And they're looking pretty good in a lot of ways, given everything that the U.S. has thrown at them.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's been a lot of talk about exactly how many missiles and how many missile launchers and how many, drones the U.S. has been able to take out. But, and yes, there was a first day salvo on both sides. as they sought to saturate the opponent's environment and take out as much of the air defense on the respective sides. Because while it's true that there was a big drop-off after the first day and two on the number of Iranian missiles and drones launched, well, the same was true of the United States, right? Their numbers of attacks, right? Because they did the same thing. You saturate the environment in the beginning, and then you go down once the air defense on both sides was less effective. We don't know how many missiles, what kind of stockpiles, how many launchers, and so forth. What we do know is that Iran has extensive underground facilities, because they've made the videos of them readily available. I've posted them on some of my own shows on my channel, and they're impressive. These aren't holes in the ground, right? These are hardened, sophisticated facilities underground. They're capable, and sometimes literally 500 meters deep inside of mountains, where they have missile production facilities. They have subways that transport the missiles to different launching bays, that a series of blast doors open in the mountain. They come out, they fire, then they go back in, and everything closes again. And the U.S. has bombed this missile city, as it's called, multiple times, but they just uncover, they wait till the bombing stops. They go out, they clear out the blocked tunnels, and then they resume, right? Because not even the U.S.'s biggest heavy ordnance ground penetrators have any chance of doing significant damage to 500 meters of granite mountain, right? And this is just one facility. We've seen the same things in other areas for drones, for fast attack boats, for anti-ship cruise missiles. The Iranians were preparing for exactly this conflict for decades now. And they have, it seems, a rather large amount of hidden underground protected facilities that they're able to wage this conflict out of. If you took out a few mobile launchers, that's fine. But if they can open up holes in the desert and fire them out of the ground that you then can't find, well, they're going to be able to keep doing this for a considerable amount of time. And actually, the numbers I've seen is in the last few days, actually, the numbers of missiles, ballistic and other missiles that Iran is firing have been ticking up, not down. And the numbers of drones that they've been launching have been dramatically rising. I mean, back up to near the first day or two, huge numbers of drones. And this comes as the Wall Street Journal and other sources in the West are telling us that Russia is providing drones to Iran in number. And this is fascinating because, of course, the design for the Shahed 136 was originally supplied by Iran to Russia at the beginning of the SMO in Ukraine back in 2022. Now, Russia has evolved those lowly Shahed 136s into a whole host of varieties of what is known in Russia as the Garan or the Geranium 2, 3, 4, 5, jet engines, stealth this, anti-air missiles. I mean, the whole host of different varieties and capabilities, and very advanced tactics owned through several years of war for using them. Now they're providing all of that back to Iran, right? All of those advanced versions, all of those less tactical lessons learned, and most importantly, perhaps the satellite guidance for helping direct them into target. Russia's getting a little bit of payback, and that payback is a female dog, as the U.S. is discovering. So
don't boil the water. This mistake ruins everything. Don't boil water. Listen to this carefully before you boil water.
If Russia and perhaps China are supplying Iran, well then, even if their own domestic facilities, military industrial facilities, were able to be taken out, they're not going to be run out of at least drones and probably missiles anytime soon, because they will have Russia and China backing them with production. And we have some indication that the U.S. realizes this, is there have been some attacks on the Caspian Sea coastline of Iran, presumably where Russia is providing equipment. Now, they're also providing food and medicine, but we're also told they are providing drones. So if that's true, then the U.S. can hit launchers and facilities forever, and it's never going to be enough.
Yeah, we see now why the U.S. was so desperate to try to isolate Iran from the rest of the world, while at the same time they're trying to isolate Russia. And it's like, yeah, all of these guys are going to team up and work together because they all have a common adversary here who wants to pursue, whether it's regime change, complete economic destruction. They want to destroy the overall pillars of the multipolar world. The last thing that I wanted to get into, kind of branching off of that, right, as we're watching as the U.S. is moving military assets out of East Asia. They're pivoting away from Asia, away from their allies like Japan and South Korea. And it's also moving its attention completely off of Ukraine. You've got the Washington Post reporting that the Pentagon is considering whether to divert supplies, including air defense interceptor missiles intended for Ukraine, to the Middle East as the war in Iran depletes some of the U.S. military's most critical munitions. So what kind of a position does this put the U.S. in when they not only cannot project power around the world like they want, but they're being forced to take away their attention from their chosen proxy wars to now focus on this other war that they've gotten themselves directly involved in, and as we've been talking about, is going to just lead to more and more disastrous consequences, especially as they move forward with ground troops.
Yeah, when I was in the military, there was a concept in the military of a two-war doctrine. The U.S. had to be capable of fighting two simultaneous wars and perhaps a small regional conflict at the same time. Forget all of that. The U.S. is way past that at this point. They can't take one regional power on, Iran, they are facing severe imperial overstretch at this point, right? They had to rush ships from the Caribbean and aircraft to begin this. We've seen them have problems now with the USS Gerald Ford, that it is just overstressed, both the crew and the ship, the material condition of the ship itself, and it had to retreat out of the combat area, whereas the Abraham Lincoln is just hiding so far on the other side of Oman from Iran that, it is scarcely part of the conflict in any kind of way at this point. They're stripping their own air defense systems from the Pacific, as you mentioned, THAAD and Patriot systems from South Korea. And now the talk is that they are going to start shifting munitions that were intended for Ukraine. And what we're talking here is part of monthly production. During the Blinken-Sullivan administration, long-term contracts were signed. Even though the Pentagon was reaching the end of its stockpiles, part of the deals were that, no longer drawdown authority to pull from U.S. stockpiles. But as the U.S. military industrial complex produces every month, then a certain part of that would go directly to Ukraine. Well, now that is being called into question. So if the U.S. makes roughly 620, let's be generous, say 650 PAC-3 interceptors a year, which is not good. Maybe Ukraine was getting 30 out of 50 a month, let's be generous. And that was nowhere near close to meet. That's like a couple hours of interceptions of Russian missiles on one night. Well, now they're going to have even less because the U.S. is desperate for them in the Middle East. And the Telegraph ran a headline last week that Zelensky was running around Europe trying to, retrieve attention and support. And they called it the Zelensky don't you forget about me tour.
It really is.
Yes. So, it puts the U.S. Proxy regime in Kiev in a very bad situation, because now they're second fiddle to not only Israel, but the U.S.'s Gulf state Arab vassals / allies there as well. And this comes as new news has emerged in the United States that Zelensky was re-diverting part of the money that the Biden administration provided to the Blinken-Sullivan administration, my apologies, to the Kiev regime. They were directing that towards Biden's re-election campaign, and that is now under investigation by the FBI. So if there was any question that Trump really didn't have a whole lot of love for Zelensky or the regime there as a whole, then it's only going to get worse for them. There's no silver lining to this cloud. Really, it's they can divert all these weapons, and it's not going to be enough in the Middle East, just like it wasn't enough in Ukraine against Russia either. So they can play these games. They can try to shuffle deck chairs around the Titanic, but they're still going to hit that iceberg.
Yeah, that is a good way to describe it. And yeah, this war of choice that the US and Israel decided to wage against a country that has literally been preparing for this conflict for decades. Like, Iran is over here going, okay, bring it. This is what you wanted. We are responding exactly as we said that we would. And it is putting the US in a bad position, to put it lightly. I know that there is certainly a lot at stake here all around, and I always appreciate you taking the time to join me to break down all of the latest here. International relations and security analyst Mark Sloboda. Y'all be sure to check out his work at boosty.to/therealpolitik. Mark, thanks so much for your time and insight.
Thanks for having me.
If anything in this video resonated with you, be sure to like it, share it with your
Oh, I think Colonel's muted us. Colonel Douglas. Doug, are you muted?
Are you want me to start?
No, I just wanted to say hello. Just hello.
I was sitting quietly on a log here, waiting to be told.
I don't boss any of you guys around. I just listen. I listen intently. So, when you look at these latest troop deployments and what we're hearing and not hearing, what stands out to you? Let me start with you, Doug. Where do you see what are you seeing over the last few hours that really it makes your hair stand up on end?
My hair normally doesn't stand up on end no matter what happens. But I think we have enough forces to probably control much of Los Angeles if that's what we need to do. I don't think this is a significant commitment of any kind that is going to change the outcome of the war. I think what's important for people to understand is that President Trump right now faces the very real probability of total humiliation. Humiliation at home and humiliation overseas, because all of his talk and bombast about destroying, defeating, subduing Iran, and wielding the righteous saber of justice, namely the U.S. Armed Forces against the evil mullahs, all that crap is going to go away. And people are going to say, what are you doing? What have you done? And I think what we're getting ready to do right now is launch what we call historically a so-called war-winning offensive. And this reminds me a lot of Market Garden in September 1944, where we decided that, if we could secure some bridges, we were home free, we could march into Germany, and the whole war would be over by Christmas.
There were considerably more troops and assets involved, but as we all know, it failed miserably. And I think what they're doing right now is they're going back over all of the target lists that they've attacked in the past. They're revisiting all of those, looking at all the satellite photography, any new intelligence that they can get. They're replenishing the stocks of exotic munitions, joint attack, surface-to-surface missiles, all kinds of other weapons, with the goal of launching probably sometime in Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, somewhere in there, a nonstop 96-hour sort of pulverization of everything in Iran. And while this is going on, I think they're going to try and find a way to insert the light infantry into the Persian Gulf, into these islands in the Strait of Hormuz. There are a couple of them. And of course, the famous Karg Island. Now, what's the problem with all of this? Well, once again, we're the World War II force reenacting World War II, and the Iranians are not in World War II, they're in World War III, and World War III is very different. Everything that happens, they can see. They have constant, uninterrupted, persistent surveillance of the entire area. They also have precision-guided weapons. Everything is precision-guided, missiles, drones, whatever. And they can reach out almost 1,000 miles with these weapons and attack very effectively. And we don't have, at the moment, inside the Persian Gulf, the means to protect those Marines and paratroopers if we use them. And I don't know how they get from wherever they start to be in a position to do very much, because once again, the Iranians can see everything. And then it's simply a decision of how long do they wait before they target us. And if they try to fly in B-22s or UH-60s helicopters, well, they're going to fly low, presumably, and everything under 15,000 feet can be acquired and effectively attacked by Iranian air defenses. So I think this is a dumb idea. I don't think it'll work, but I could be wrong, and it could be enormously successful, in which case then you get the complete disintegration of Iranian society and the state and chaos across the region that'll spill all the way into Europe.
Colonel Davis, Colonel McGregor brings up the Allied operations, Operation Market Garden. Others have suggested this could turn into World War I Gallipoli disaster, trying to unseat the Ottoman Empire, really, and wind up in a bloodbath. Where do you see it? And anything you agree with, disagree with what Doug just said?
Yeah, and the interesting thing, first of all, this is less than 30 minutes ago on Trump Truth Social. We were all worried about what might be happening this weekend, because the deadline that he extended from the ultimatum was supposed to have expired tomorrow, and he just now says, as per Iranian government request, please let this statement serve as a represent that I am pausing the period of energy plant destruction by 10 additional days to Monday, April 6th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Talks are ongoing, and despite erroneous statements to the contrary by fake news media and others, they are going very well. So, the part of the issue is, man, how do you take anything President Trump says at face value? Whether that's earlier today where he said, again, they're already completely destroyed. They hardly have any missiles and drones left. And they are definitely wanting to negotiate. At the same time, Foreign Minister Arakchi repeated again on state television with all these images on the side of the camera of all these people around the country celebrating and supporting their country and their government. So he obviously has their support, is the point being of that. And then as President Trump was making that statement, you had Trey Yingst on Fox News with all the sirens in the background. He's wearing his Kevlar helmet. As he said, the 10th barrage from Iran today was in the process of being landed, and that was even before dark. Who knows how many they may get later tonight. But, I mean, every physical thing you can see shows that Iran is very far from a defeated foe. And, in fact, they have their hand around the Strait of Hormuz, and therefore 20% of the global oil supply, also the natural gas, and also the fertilizers and all the other feedstocks that are necessary to feed a good portion of the globe. So they are definitely in the driver's seat here. When you think that you're going to go in with a few troops here and there and have a spot, Doug said there about Market Garden. That's exactly what I was thinking. The same kind of thing. And Gallipoli. I've shown both of those on the show earlier today, in fact, about how the similarities are and the difficulties. And we don't even have as many assets. I also had somebody on from the British Navy, a retired Commodore, who took place in a ground operation in the Falklands War, where he said he was part of a battle group that got a smaller number of people ashore and trying to do the same kind of thing. And he said they lost 4 ships in the process. That's back then. That was before you had a lot of missiles and drones and all this other kind of stuff. And even that was more difficulty. Every one of these operations that Doug was talking about in here, they all come with a pretty high price tag. And that's if you have it thought out well, and there's a plausible military prep hope that it's going to succeed. This doesn't have that. This is one of those, to me, Doug, you say whatever you think. To me, this looks like it's just flying by the seat of your pants, figure stuff out on the fly and say, throwing something at the wall and see if it'll stick. It's not been resourced. It's not been rehearsed. It's not been equipped. And this just has disaster written all over it. And I pray that this statement here about, we're going to wait 10 days, hopefully that's not just for the energy, but it's trying to find an off-ramp here. I really hope that's the case.
Yeah, go ahead, Doug. Do you respond to that? Hope you're muted. Is that on our side?
No, it's on our side.
Oh, okay. It's on Doug's side.
Oh, he muted himself. It's automatically muting me. It must be NSO. Anyway.
Go ahead.
Let's look at a couple of other data points that I think we need to take into consideration. England, that is Great Britain, is just about out of oil. They figure that in 2 weeks, they'll be completely out of oil. You have a similar situation, by the way, in Australia. And I was amazed to discover that Australia doesn't have a single refinery. So that country could come to a complete screeching halt in the very near future. They have to look at the impact on India, where they have millions of people lined up at the gas pump trying to buy refined gasoline. The only one that seems to be doing really well at this point is Russia. Russia is making an additional $250 million per day on top of what it was already earning every single day. So while the Strait of Hormuz bleeds commercial traffic, Russian oil becomes more and more valuable. And if you look at Asia and Europe, and now I think we're seeing this begin to get into North Africa and perhaps other parts of Africa, there is a food, fuel, fertilizer, and feed crisis developing. In other words, the financial, economic consequences are building such that if Trump cannot declare victory very soon, the rest of the world is going to come down on him very hard and say, stop, the war is killing us. So that's the first thing. And then when you look at these islands that are targeted, the question you have to ask is, assuming you can get there, what do they do for you? Invasion or blockade of Karg Island? All right, go ahead and do that. What difference is it going to make? That's not the only place where oil can be shipped out by Iran. And if you do this, if you go in great strength into the Persian Gulf, that shuts the movement down, of vessels through the straits to zero. Right now, it's dropped off by about 95%. So the 5% that are getting through, tankers headed to India, tankers headed to Japan, tankers headed to China, they'll be stopped as well. Now, China has a substantial reserve of oil, many months left. That's not the case with most everybody else. So I think that the whole idea right now is, yes, they want a war-winning offensive. Can they do it from the air? Is an attack inside the Gulf going to do any good? And if they do these things, what else are they going to hit? Are they going to hit desalinization plants and power plants in Iran, in which case everything on the other side of the Gulf, up and down on the eastern side, western side, is going to be destroyed. And it'll take decades to recover from this kind of damage. So I just think a lot of people in Washington are disconnected from reality right now, most of all the Pentagon and the president.
I'll throw this out to both of you, Colonels. The Pentagon, according to Dave DeCamp, commenting on Axios reporting this afternoon, the Pentagon is developing options for a potential major escalation against Iran that could involve ground troops. U.S. officials and other sources speaking to Axios reporter Barak Ravid, former IDF intelligence officer, described the potential escalation as, quote, a final blow that would give Trump more leverage and room to declare victory. though all indications are that Iran is ready to face ground forces and that any such operation would prolong the war. We heard from the Iranian reports today from Iran saying that they are mobilizing upwards of 1 million fighters for a potential ground war, according to Iranian sources, and also being reported by Al Jazeera. So, Colonel Davis, final blow that would give Trump more leverage. But I'm confused because Trump in the past few days has been telling us that this war is over, that we've won, and that any discussion around that is fake news. So why would we have to have an invasion and a final blow if the war is already over? And I'm just confused.
Well, yeah. And this just goes on to show that just the disconnected from reality that President Trump is. And by the way, I wanted to add this one other data point that Doug just mentioned here is the Iran conflict is endangering Taiwan's semiconductor industry by throttling supply of vital materials such as helium, aluminum, and bromine, and crucially energy, as Iran-backed shipping routes jeopardize over a third of Taiwan's Qatari liquefied natural gas, which they need to make these threats. So you're talking about there's also a near-term threat even to the semiconductor industry. This is just having tentacles all over the global economy, not just the fact of the global, the oil itself. So that's putting pressure literally all over the world that Doug was talking about on President Trump to get this over with. And I think that the allure of having, let's go in with one big blow here and it's going to win it. I'll just tell you, there is no one big blow that you can level. We fired 10,000 strikes so far of everything that we have. And I'm talking bunker busters, these big ones, JASSMs, the Tomahawks, you name it. We've been firing everything. And obviously, it's now almost background noise for the Iranians. They have figured out how to endure this, and they could go on probably indefinitely like this. So the only thing that you could theoretically do is bring in a tactical nuclear weapon. And God help us all if that's the case. If Trump has some idea that he's going to have a big once and for all kind of thing, I don't even know what else you can bring in that even theoretically could bring in one final blow, because there is nothing. You've already attacked everything, and now we're attacking things multiple times in some cases. And so I don't know what they're talking about. There's no conventional answer for that, I'll just tell you. But the pressure on President Trump to get this over with fast is about to start striking big time here at home, in the Middle East, in Europe, and of course, now you see also in Asia. So this is a disaster of epic proportions. It's unfolding before our eyes. And you can understand why President Trump is desperate to get this over with. And that may lead to desperate actions that have even less a chance of success. And I worry a lot about what could be coming.
Doug, I get you to respond to that. I think you're spot on. But where would these troops, do you think, be landing? There's lots of speculation. You mentioned Karg Island. We've had other people say Konarak, which is a port area there. And then Benjamin Netanyahu today released a video where it looks like the backdrop behind him is Konarak, as if sort of like telegraphing, or as a feint behind him in his background that, almost like the deception before the Normandy landings. We're going to try to, everyone thinks you're going to land at Calais because it's close, it's as close to the UK as possible. And then you get Monty out there parading around looking like he's about to lead this invasion across Calais. And then it happens at the Normandy beaches, right? All of this deception was happening. But when you look at the Strait of Hormuz, like, how much deception can there actually be? You've got Kuwait, but you've got eyes and ears everywhere.
Well, that's the bottom line. Deception, I think, is an impossibility. That doesn't mean that the Iranians have to be everywhere at once. They just have to have numerous weapon systems within range of any of the potential targets, and that's what they've got. They can sit 150 kilometers inside Iran from north to south, and they can take under fire very effectively any of the potential targets that we've mentioned. The question is, first of all, if you're in the Marines, you've got to come ashore. How are you going to do that? Are you going to fly directly from your amphibious carriers, or perhaps from the Navy's carriers, fly from there to some point on land? Do you then get out and reorganize and get ready to go and then fly further? I mean, this is a very complex operation. There's not, as Dan said, there's not much time to get ready for it. So I'm hopeful that as we progress in the days ahead, that we can avoid the whole thing altogether. Now, that may not be possible. But here's another data point. This just came into me. This is from Channel 13 in Israel. It was originally in Hebrew. It was translated for me. And it says, the chief of staff of the Israeli Defense Force warned last night in a cabinet meeting, the Israeli army is on the verge of collapse from within. I'm raising 10 red flags, Zamir added. The army now needs a conscription law, a reserve law, and a law to extend mandatory service. The reserves will not hold up. He said these things in front of the prime minister, heads of the security apparatus, and ministers. So I think we have to understand that the nation for which we're fighting, which is really Israel, is a real problem. They've got an enormous problem on their hands. And I don't know how they're going to solve their problems, but we can't solve that problem for them, what happens internally. So bottom line is, I think the whole thing has reached a strategic inflection point. And they have to make a decision pretty quickly because of the economic circumstances as to what they're going to do next. And the notion initially is going to be double down. Keep doing something which has failed thus far in the hopes that it will produce success. I think that's where we're headed. I don't think it's going to produce success.
I want to ask both of you, we have some super chats come in for some questions here. The German Rabbit asks this question. Clayton, ask the colonels how the Russians and the Chinese would react to an American draft mobilization. We saw the increase, obviously, in the enlistment age in the United States, but maybe take that question and then also just the Chinese-Russian piece of this story. We heard from President Putin today saying that what we are about to see from an energy perspective is going to be worse than COVID, and the Russians saying that Europe, the UK, will be begging Russia for oil and natural gas. We heard that from Dmitriev, a diplomat from Russia. So first on just the draft question, Dan, you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah. Look, I think that would be just domestic disaster to try and have a draft. I mean, I think that they have extended the ages here because I think that there are those in the Pentagon and apparently the White House that are saying, hey, if this thing goes south, this war here, I mean, we could just get sucked in and we may need more people. We better start getting them right now. And so you want to try to do that, quietly if you can, by just allowing more people to come in and join by extending the ages here. That's not going to work. Number one, I doubt there are very many people that are in that age that are also qualified and desire to come in. And if you go into a draft situation, I mean, there's a reason why we got rid of the draft that got us out of the Vietnam War and why they went to the all professional military and why we've used it so easily since that way, because you affect such a small portion of the population. But if you now start going back into that to where you're now pulling these, kids from all over the country who have no interest in or desire to serve and force them into a war that they don't, you're going to have a revolt on your hands. I truly believe that. I don't think it would work anymore. I think that day is past unless we had a Pearl Harbor type thing where somebody attacked us out of nowhere. And then even then, it wouldn't be, I don't think, the reaction, because our population isn't the same as it was in 1941. So I don't think we would react the same way. But there would be a number of people that would do that to take care of the country, but not this, not a war of choice that we went into. The only reason you're doing a draft is because you ignored everybody's advice that had any sense, like Doug McGregor. And you went down this path because he was saying, even on my own show several times for months ahead of this, what a disaster this would be. And it's unfolding just like he said, and in some ways even worse. And people would see that then, and they're going to go, no, I'm not going to send my son or daughter into death here. I mean, we're not going to do that. So I think that if you get to that point, you're going to have a revolt on your hand.
Of course, likely not to have another Pearl Harbor, because now with alternative media and our show, I know I would be immediately out there saying, oh, did the president know about this ahead of time and allow this to happen, just like Pearl Harbor? False flag. I think 1941 looks a lot different now with alternative media. I think you would have a disaster on your hands. Doug, what do you think on the draft question and Russia, China in all of this?
Well, first on the draft question, we went to a volunteer army and it had the same impact as going off the gold standard. Once we went off the gold standard, we could print as much money as we wanted and use it any way we wanted to. There was no longer any accountability. There was no longer a need to raise taxes to pay for military operations.
Right.
So that's effectively why we went to the volunteer army, and everybody in Washington loves that. So I see no evidence that they're going to try and draft anybody, because I think Dan's absolutely right. And I can just see that Baron Cameron and Lutnick's children and Witkoff's sons, and let's just go down the list, Kushner's, I can see them all rushing to go fight against Iran for Greater Israel. I don't think so. I'd be very surprised.
Right.
So no, I don't see a draft coming at all. Now, then there's the other thing. The Chinese and the Russians have been watching this in disbelief. Everybody thinks, well, they're our enemies. Okay. Most of them would just like to do business with the rest of the world, and they're not interested in going to war with us. And I think they view our thinking as incredibly stupid. They can't believe we're doing the things that we're doing. But what they will do, if we continue down this road and there's no evidence whatsoever that we're willing to get off, you will have both Moscow and Beijing will try first to talk directly to President Trump. And they'll say, look, this has got to stop for the sake of the world, for the world economy, for everybody. We don't want Iran to collapse. If you're trying to destroy Iran and you succeed, millions and millions of refugees will pour over the border into Turkey, into Syria, into Iraq. Eventually, they'll find their way to Europe. This is a catastrophe. So we don't want this to happen. I don't think that will get that far, but I'm sure that that's on the minds of both Putin and I even think the German chancellor, as deranged as he is capable of understanding the implications of that, along with Macron. And I think that's why they both said, forget it. We're not going to participate in this crazy war. But in the final analysis, all of this, unfortunately, rests with Donald Trump. And if he can't find a way to declare victory, then he's going to face a very difficult time in Washington, D.C. This could actually force him out of office. And since everything with him is mortgaged to vanity, I worry a great deal about what Dan mentioned, which is the possibility that somebody says, we'll use a tactical nuclear weapon. And we all know what that means. You use a tactical nuclear weapon, which is a misnomer, doesn't exist. Then others who have nuclear weapons are immediately on alert, and there's a real danger of everybody getting involved. So I hope that doesn't happen.
Another super chat here.
And Clayton, sorry, one thing I want to add to that. Sorry, I had a.
You want to file free? Hit it.
Problem with my camera there. Quick move. You talk about China and Russia. There's one thing that hasn't gotten enough focus yet. I'm sure it'll get that way as time goes on. But there's a real problem that is developing that China and Russia are definitely paying attention to. And that is when President Trump, and a lot of people have been saying forever, America is the most powerful military country in the history of the world. No one else is even close. Trump says that all the time. And now that they see we can't even bring Iran to its heels. And we don't have enough ammunition to defend against Iranian missiles. And we don't have enough offensive missiles to do anything that's going to bring them to their heels. I promise you, China's going, okay, if we were worried about the United States like in a Taiwan scenario or something like that, I think that their fear of us has gone way down in their recognition that the paucity of our industrial capacity, however, the few amount of missiles we have, the technical limitations of the interceptor missiles, whether that's PAC-3 or THAAD, I think that they're looking at their production rates and their storage rates, and they're looking, we can saturate anything you've got, and you're keeping your ships far away from Iran, and they don't even have a navy effectively. We've destroyed their surface combatants. They still have the speedboats, and they're a big danger to us, despite what we claim. But in terms of even a brown or blue water navy, they don't have that. China does. And I think the same thing with the Russians. They're saying, hey, man, if we had to fight you on the European soil somewhere, I think that their confidence and their capabilities, it went even higher than it already was, which was pretty high. We are exposing that we are not this incredible military machine. And in fact, we're a lot weaker than people thought, no matter what the president says.
Oh, for sure. I couldn't agree more with you. And I believe Doug agrees with you 100% on that. Here's a question. Here's a question from Blueskin. Says, do you guys think that the military would recall veterans even if they're outside their IRR time?
It's been done before. I think so. A lot of people, when they retire or leave the service, they fill out a form, and the form says, if there's a national emergency or there's a requirement, are you willing to come back and serve? And most people sign that and say yes. So I think I think they could do a lot of things to bring more people back. But It's not the answer. It's not going to change the outcome. This is not a function of how many men under arms you've got. The very, from conception or inception to where we are now, is a disaster. It's never been carefully thought through. All of the underlying assumptions were always flawed because we mirror image. We assume that the enemy, whoever it is, always thinks like us. That's never the case. We impute things to the Chinese, to the Russians, we did it to the Germans, the Japanese. It doesn't work. The other thing is that we prefer assumptions we like over the evidence. Instead of digging hard and saying, where's the evidence for this assumption? We say, yeah, I believe that. That's good. Let's go with that. And then finally, there's this tragic predisposition to dismiss the possibility that it won't work. And then what do? How do you get out of it? I mean, if we put all these troops out there, and I know it's only 10,000, still a lot of American manpower in uniform that could be spread across the Persian Gulf and these various islands and places. If it all falls apart, how do we get them out? Besides that, how do you ensure they have water? How do you replenish the ammunition? I mean, all of this kind of stuff. I just don't think anybody's thought it all through.
Dan, let me piggyback off of that.
Yeah, please.
Because the great example of that, one of the points Doug just made about that, we are operating on our preference. This is what we would prefer. This is the outcome we'd like to have. And then even if the evidence isn't there, and we certainly don't do any research for it, we just go with it because that's what we want to do. Lindsey Graham has been talking about this a lot by saying, hey, we can take Kharg Island. He was seen on, I think it was CBS News over the weekend, I think it was. And they said, hey, look, this Atlantic Journal here says there's a lot of problems going into Kharg. And it was a pretty good military assessment of the challenges. And he goes, yeah, I don't care what that Monday morning armchair colonel says or whoever that was. I believe in the U.S. Marines, and they can do Iwo Jima, and they can definitely do this. And I about fell out of my chair because I'm like, dude, the difference between Iwo Jima and Kharg Island is about as different as night is from day. And he either doesn't know, doesn't care to know, or doesn't want to find out. It's just like, that's what I want to be true, so it is. And Trump listens to guys like this. And then Keith Kellogg, oh my God, his advice here lately is, yeah, we'll just roll up the Persian Gulf with a couple of Marine ships there in the Boxer and the Tripoli. And yeah, we'll just take the first part and then we'll motor on up to the next part like it's no problem. And I'm like, my God, if these are the men that are advising President Trump, no wonder we're making so many bad mistakes.
Yeah, the point that, Doug, you've been making for a long time is like, we have this 1945 style military that's still built for like a World War II military. So we're going to just roll in more aircraft carriers and that's going to work. You saw what happened with USS, Gerald Ford. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to be permanently stationed there just off the coast of the island of Hormuz, just making sure that ships are going through and the Iranians won't attack those ships. It's madness.
It really is madness. And the other thing that disturbs me about people like Lindsey Graham, 19,000 Marines died in the Pacific seizing islands. Nobody knows that. I don't think he understands what that means. Frankly, not all of those islands, by the way, needed to be seized. That's another tragedy. And 58,000 airmen died in the 8th Air Force trying to penetrate German air defenses. Now, what I'm trying to get across is how many ballistic missiles does it take to achieve what I would call mass casualties? If you put 3,000, 4,000 men on a particular island and you can pepper the island with these ballistic missiles, how many of them will be killed? That's the whole point. And what are we asking them to die for? What gives us an assurance that seizing a particular rock in the Persian Gulf is suddenly going to prompt the complete opening and abandonment of the Straits of Hormuz by the Iranians? Well, there's nothing that will do that. And by the way, if you used a tactical nuclear weapon and you think at that point the Iranians would throw in the towel, I've got news for you. I think the opposite would happen. I think they'd be working tirelessly to hurl a nuclear weapon back in our faces as soon as they could develop one or receive one from someone else. So I just don't see anything positive emerging from this succession of events that we're witnessing. This has been wrong-headed from the beginning. And this was something that I think Donald Trump knew he was going to have to do when he was elected because of the people that paid for his election.
Guys, I'll get you out of here in just a minute. I wanted to have you maybe talk. You mentioned it briefly, Doug, just on the Americans killed number. We had Dr. Trita Parsi on the show yesterday, who learned that within 24 hours of this outbreak, they had classified the number of casualties. And he made the point that you don't classify casualty numbers if you're happy about those casualty numbers. The numbers of American dead, American wounded have been very tight-lipped from the Pentagon. What are you hearing maybe from your sources, or what's your assessment? Do you believe the official number that they're telling us? Dan, first to you.
No. But then again, I don't believe much of what comes out of the government.
Yeah, unfortunately, like I said a minute ago, while President Trump is talking about how he has destroyed Iran and they don't even have the ability to launch missiles or drones, as he's speaking, a 10th round was falling on Israel at the moment. So I don't trust a single thing that comes out of them. And, we've seen the Iranians have claimed, and they did again this afternoon, they said there's over 500 American killed and I think like 1,800 wounded or so. I certainly don't take that at face value either. And it could certainly be for domestic cases to make their people feel better. I don't trust a single thing out there. But, man, with all this firepower, and when we've had to move out of 13 different bases, according to the New York Times analysis, it just doesn't seem like there's going to be that few casualties. Maybe there is. Maybe we've gotten really lucky. Maybe the defenses have been good. But I trust nothing, unfortunately.
Dan, you brought up the last question that I just was about to ask both of you, which is the New York Times report on these 13 American bases, which the New York Times now says have largely been destroyed. They're uninhabitable. The Iranians yesterday announced that they know that Americans who were stationed there, commanders and soldiers, have fled, and some of them in hiding or outside of those bases, and they are pursuing them. Their words, pursuing them. In other words, hunting them down, I would assume. What's your assessment of these American bases in the region? And by the way, they told us they were going to do this in the same way they told us that the Strait of Hormuz was going to be shut down. Like, this is somehow news to the Trump administration. That's kind of shocking. But Doug, first to you on these American bases, this New York Times report.
Well, initially they hit 27 of them. So there were 27 bases damaged. Now they're saying that 13 are totally demolished. They've eliminated all of the expensive early warning radars that we had placed in the region. And this has hurt us badly, particularly in Israel, because they don't get the several minutes of early warning time that they were getting previously. They're hearing, that you've got to get into the underground shelters and you got like 60 seconds or a minute and a half to get there. And this is taking its toll in Israel. I think, the problem is, once again, we were victims of our own happy, rosy scenario. And I don't know how else to put it, Dan, do you?
I don't. And, we're at the mercy of what people in the region are reporting because, I hardly can trust anything that's coming out of reporters either. But based on the paucity of our responses, I think it's pretty likely that there's been a lot of casualties. You've got the Navy has been moved back allegedly somewhere around 1,000 miles away from the Iranian shore. So they're not doing anything good. Most of our aircraft, according to reports I'm getting, that we're still doing, despite what the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff said on like the 4th or 5th day, we're now still doing stand off because when we try to do stand in, we have what happened with that F-35 the other day. It gets knocked out of the sky, or the MQ-9 Reapers, they get knocked out, which is also making it more difficult to do targeting because we don't have that persistent stare over there. And everything that we're using so far is a lot less effective than what it's claimed to be. So that's why we circle back around. It seems like the casualties are probably going to be higher, and one wonders if we're ever going to be told the truth.
I guess a final question on Iran's capability, guys, which is, you mentioned the 10,000 strikes so far. We've hit them with just about everything. Is Iran still holding back? Do we still have lots of hypersonic missiles? Do they still have this capacity to strike and they've been holding back in large capacity? Do we have any sense of how much of their munitions have been totally destroyed, downgraded?
Not sure if you saw the news, but Fox News is claiming President Trump is declining in the polls. President Trump responded and says,
well, my impression is that they have a large number of hypersonic missiles they have yet to fire. That's very clear. They made that clear because they started utilizing older missiles for the purpose of wearing down air and missile defenses, also identifying air and missile defense batteries and radars and so forth. I don't see any evidence that they're about to run out. I mean, if we had believed everything we were told back in 2022, the Russians were running out of missiles and ammunition and tanks and everything else by Christmas of 2022, and the war was going to be over. So again, I go back to Dan. I'm very skeptical of whatever we're told. And remember that the Iranians have spent at least 2+ decades getting ready for exactly this event. So I suspect they have a lot left over. And frankly, don't underestimate the ability of the Chinese in particular, which is a giant manufacturing base, to replenish their losses. I think we have to take that into consideration. You know, Luke Groman was on the other day, one of my favorite people in terms of financial analysis, and he pointed out, the Chinese have said we can build 1,000 rocket motors for cruise missiles in just one day. We're hard pressed to build 20 or 30 rocket motors in a week. When you turn to shipbuilding, it's even worse. We may build a few ships a year. They can build, 800 to 1,000 every year. The Chinese manufacturing capability that lies behind Iran is enormous, and we shouldn't underestimate its ability to resupply Iran.
That's unbelievable. So, we're not marshaling tens of thousands of Higgins boats on a moment's notice out of New Orleans, right, Dan?
Yeah, right. That's one of the things I've been warning about for decades, really. In the mid 2000s, I was working for the Future Combat Systems program in Fort Bliss, Texas, which was supposed to have been this future warfare organization that we put together, so we would have a leap ahead, et cetera, after winning the Cold War. And I watched us show incredible incompetence at being able to manage anything, and so we were trying to have all these gold-plated weapon systems, and literally none of them ever saw the light of day. We never produced anything. And then they said, well, we'll cancel that after, I think, 6 years and $20 billion worth. And they said, all right, we're going to have the ground combat vehicle. Use the technology of this and we'll get something next. That didn't work. And then they had another one, then another one. And now we're on, I think it's literally the 5th iteration since 2003 to try to find a next generation leap ahead combat vehicle. And now all we're doing is just continue to upgrade the M1 from, the 1970s technology, for example. And you look at how long it takes us to build a ship, how long it takes us to build, I think it's like 18 months or something to get just even a handful of THAAD interceptors or so. And we have so many high dollar items, and they take so long. They're so complicated and so expensive. You can't get very many of them. And now when you get into a situation like we are in right now, to where the majority of our PAC-3 interceptors have been used, and as long as the Iranians keep going on with this sustained rate of fire, which they've got, you're going to run out of them. And then you're going to have to go into some of the older stuff that doesn't work as good, like the PAC-2s, for example, and they're going to be even less capable. If we get into some kind of an unexpected conflict with either Russia or China, North Korea, something like that, we are literally going to be hung out to dry, because we can't replace our ships if we lose those. We can't replace our planes if we lose those. And now then, because we have foolishly chosen a war to use the remainder of our stocks after we gave a bunch to Israel since 2023 and to Ukraine since 2022, we're on E right now. And our industrial capacity is still at snail pace. So we have put ourselves in a strategic vulnerability that's hard to even imagine. And we just have to hope that there is no Pearl Harbor type moment now, because we are going to be in a world of hurt.
Doug, a final question, which is President Trump said, well, the option is unleash hell. They're not going to end this war, no ceasefire. We're going to unleash hell on them. But to Dan's point, what do we have left? What hell could be unleashed other than using nuclear weapons do we have at our disposal at this stage that we haven't basically run out of?
Well, there's no shortage of bluster and bombast and hot air. That's clear.
That's a good point.
I think we will try to ratchet up the intensity of the strikes. In other words, more strikes with more munitions, more missiles in a shorter period of time than we have done in the past. And I think that's really what the pause is all about. The pause is also there so that you can get some more missiles and things out to the fleet and probably to Germany, and then ultimately down into the region for the Air Force. That's what's going on. I think that's where we're headed. And that's the only answer they can come up with at this stage. And they're hoping that if they can suppress the enemy long enough, that they can safely get Marines and paratroopers into the Persian Gulf to stand on some islands and sort of offer that as evidence for victory. That's about all I can imagine at this stage. And I think that's where we're headed. I don't think it's going to change much. I think things are going to get worse.
And sorry, Clayton, let me jump in real quick. That reminds me of something, Doug, that you told me on our show maybe a month or so before this war came out, is that I had asked you, how long with that much combat power that Trump had assembled there, how long could they go before they have to start replenishing? And you said they can probably go about 2, maybe 3 weeks is what you told me. And now here we are at the 3+ week mark. And now here's this 10-day pause all of a sudden, because you told me they would have to significantly reduce the rate of fire of these things, because then you've used up what you had stored forward, and you're going to have to bring the stuff forward and bring it from other places to include on the ships and in the ground. And I think that's the most likely explanation for this 10-day pause.
Well, I'm glad you explained your question. I was about to say I did not have sex with that woman. I don't know anything about her. I've never met her.
Do need to specify.
Here we go with what you need to know about today.
Same strategy that Israel has for years. No strategy. In this chaos, the military does what it does the best. Simply hammer the nail.
A $13 billion flagship and nearly daily sewage breakdowns below deck. Many crew members are angry.
No, the objects are horrible for the Navy.
Yeah.
Horrible for the Navy, horrible for the United States military. This is the most advanced ship in the world, supposed to be.
Yeah.
But it's not designed to fight a war.
The United States trying to project power, 5,000 or 6,000 miles from its shores, which means Iran has geographical advantages that cannot be overcome.
Cannot be overcome. Oh boy, we have got a special report today with important guests who've flown all the way from the United States. Right here in front of this big map, we're going to share with you a very American perspective as we break down the war in Iran here on the Sanchez Effect. Let's do this. Hello again, everybody. I'm Rick Sanchez. So what President Trump and the people who chose to attack Iran, a country that did not attack them, have done is having really severe consequences. If you game theory this out, right, this does not end in a result that is in any way good for the United States of America. And the signs are plentiful. Geopolitically, economically, militarily, and I'm going to take you through them. And let's talk about some of those signs. Here's one right now. Reuters is now confirming just within the past 24 hours, and they've talked to officials in Bahrain who are members of the government, that it was indeed a Patriot interceptor, not an Iranian missile, a Patriot interceptor on March 9th that blew up a residential area that injured some 32 people, and a lot of those people are going to die. Wait, you're probably saying to yourself, right? Weren't these U.S. interceptors supposed to protect the people of Bahrain and the other countries in the GCC? So what happened? And by the way, not just now, what happens moving forward? Will countries like Bahrain rely on the U.S. in the future militarily? Will they trust the United States strategically, right? Look at this story. This is about the Gerald R. Ford. This is a story about low morale, bad plumbing, and even sabotage.
A $13 billion flagship and nearly daily sewage breakdowns below deck. Sailors work 19-hour shifts to keep 650 toilets running. Many crew members are angry, one admits.
Fire on board the USS Gerald R. Ford started in the ship's main laundry spaces. 600 sailors are without beds. More than 200 sailors were treated for smoke inhalation.
Some serious problems
with their sewage plumbing. So the best American warship that came, the American soldiers had a tough time going to the toilet.
One sailor on board the fort told the Journal that many crew members are angry and upset, with some saying they want to leave the Navy at the end of the deployment. The sailor said she was strongly considering quitting herself.
What a mess. That's militarily. I want to talk to you now about the United States, the West in general's economic supremacy, right? Banking, trade, currency. Look what the Central Bank of Kazakhstan, of all places, just did. Are they starting a trend? Maybe. Kazakhstan has just become the very first country to truly start betting against fiat currency, full throttle. They're actually having their central bank go out and buy Bitcoin, right? Crypto, as they call it, $350 million worth. Why? Well, because central banks around the world are losing faith in the fiat system of currency. In other words, I mean, let's just call it what it is, right? They're losing faith in the dollar. Why? Well, the U.S. right now, because of this war, is about to owe $40 trillion. That's the debt, and it's gone up because of this war, about another trillion since Mr. Trump took office. Now let's talk about the U.S. relationship with Israel, right? It's been there forever. Nobody ever really much thought about it inside the United States. But now it's turning out to be possibly the worst merger from a public relations standpoint in like 100 years. See, the United States used to be admired, or at least respected, by most of the people around the world. But this Iran war is making a lot of people hate the United States almost as much as they hate Israel for what Israel has been doing in Gaza. Again, not good optics. So ask yourself, if you're an American, right? Is Israel worth following? Is Israel worth fighting for? After all, we're told it's in our interest as Americans. And we're also told that Israel is a great country with really smart leaders who have everything figured out. They have calculated everything to the last imaginable step, right? Toward a victory somehow. Have they? No. No. I want you to listen to something. Listen to what this high-ranking former leader of the Israeli Knesset just told Tucker Carlson. He says the Israeli government, his word, clueless.
I listened to you very carefully in the last couple of weeks and the way you try to conceive the Israeli strategy from Netanyahu's 40 years life mission to the greater land of Israel, biblically speaking, or messianic eschatological one. And I envy you that you really believe that we have something like that. Okay? It doesn't work that way. The same strategy that Israel has for years, no strategy. In Israel, in many, many cases, the compilation of many tactics sometimes assemble into a de facto strategy, but otherwise nothing. Bottom line is nobody has a clue. And in this chaos, the military does what it does the best, simply hammer the nail.
Hammer the nail. So the U.S. is being led by a tiny country's politicians who are clueless. In fact, Mr. Abraham goes even further in helping us understand the irrationality of what he calls the irrationality of the Israeli mindset. He says it's all about, for Israel, he says it's all about looking for a way to destroy other countries around it. And somehow, he explains, it all has to do with Hitler.
Every decade we have a new Adolf Hitler. And since everybody is the arch enemy, there is only one solution to this one enemy: removal. And therefore, when you ask me what is the Israeli political echelon, forget about the people in the street. The political echelon approach toward any kind of resolution, whatever it is it's not a dialoguist one. Now, it is not just about Netanyahu, which is a case by himself. When you look at what is allegedly called opposition in Israel, they simply compete with the government who is more aggressive, who is more as if resilient, who has more so-called creative solution to the enemy we have to demolish and obliterate.
So if Israel is clueless and is using bad practices, then my God, what are we, right? Which leads us to this, where we are right now. Think about it. Just within the past 72 hours, right, since I've been keeping count, the Trump administration has talked about boots on the ground, but then they deny that there's going to be boots on the ground. So said the president in a conflicting statement. They have threatened to destroy Iran's energy grid. He did, Mr. Trump did, but then he chose not to, right? It has talked about sending Marines into this area, right? But then hasn't explained where, for what, why they're going. I mean, it's also said that the Strait of Hormuz that you see right there behind me is still essentially open. But it's not. It's not. So it's like, you know, here's another thing. Neither the American people nor Congress have yet been told to this day what actually was the imminent threat that was posed by Iran. Do you know? I mean, instead, my gosh, I can think of at least 4 or 5 different competing narratives that have been shared with us about why we went in. You know what they are, or you've heard them all, including this one.
We stood and waited for that attack to come first before we hit them. We would suffer much higher casualties. And so the president made the very wise decision. We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties and perhaps even higher those killed. And then we would all be here answering questions about why we knew that and didn't act.
So here's the Secretary of State essentially saying the only reason we went to Iran was because Israel wanted to go into Iran and we had to go in because they wanted to go in. So where are we right now when it comes to this war? Is it winnable? And what happens if it's not? We're lining up right here in front of the big map to bring you this conversation with 2 people I very much respect. Scott Ritter, former weapons inspector, who, as you know, tried to warn the world once about the Iraq lie, and Garland Nixon, a very well-known and respected broadcaster here in the United States. Let's do this. You know, this is something I've been wanting to do for some time. I think it's important. This is a conversation that we're going to have now, as promised, really between 3 guys who are Americans. You know, it's our country that's very much involved in this right now. Many would argue, in fact, responsible for this. So what are the implications of it, not just with what's going on today, but perhaps even long term? So as you know, joining me now, Garland Nixon. He's one of the best known radio hosts in the United States. I've been listening to him for years and I've worked with him for years on a lot of different shows. And of course, Scott Ritter, who really needs no introduction. He's probably one of the best known persons who speaks to these types of things, not just with this incident, but he's been doing it, obviously, around the time of the Iraq War. So I think this is a perfect opportunity for us to catch up on this situation. And we're going to start, gentlemen, with the latest news, the breaking news, which is there appears to be some kind of talk about the U.S. and the Iranians sitting down and trying to negotiate this out. Now, let me show you why this story or where this story came from. If we could go to cut 8, guys, let's put this up so people can see. The Iranian foreign minister secretly informed Witkoff of a supreme leader's agreement to negotiate with the United States. So what they're saying here is that the supreme leader has given the go-ahead for people inside of Iran to negotiate with Mr. Witkoff. Some people would wonder why you would negotiate with Mr. Witkoff since he was the one they were negotiating with when they got bombed. But that's perhaps another point that we're going to be talking about. The question is this story real? And there are some issues. And I'll start with you, Garland. The issue is this story is not coming from inside Iran. It's not even coming from the United States. It's not coming from Europe. It's coming from Israel. The sourcing on this story is from Israel. You say what?
Well, this contradicts everything we've heard from Iran since the beginning of the conflict, where they've said that they won't negotiate with the United States because of every time they've negotiated with them, they've been attacked. So that certainly seems logical.
Oh, yeah, and there's that.
Yeah. So it's coming out of Israel at this point, that's one of the issues with this conflict. It's hard to believe anything that we hear that doesn't come, to be quite frank, that doesn't come from the Iranians.
So you don't think the Iranians are really agreeing? You don't buy the story?
No,
at this point, given what's been reported.
Yes.
I hope it's true.
Yeah, so, as do I.
Yeah.
I would buy it more if it came from one of the Iranians' allies, such as maybe a Russia or China or something like that. Out of Israel, I find it hard to believe.
What do you think?
First of all, I hope it's not true. Because if it's true, it means Iran's capitulated. And if Iran capitulates, that means the United States, who has initiated an illegal war of aggression, wins. I'm American. I like to win.
Yeah, but hold on. Let me stop you there. I'm going to disagree with you. What if the United States, I'm not saying this has happened, what if the United States, we're going to remove all of the sanctions and we're going to pay repatriation for all of the things, reparations, pardon me, for all the damage that we have done?
You think Donald Trump's going to do that? You think Donald Trump's going to articulate that going into a midterm election where, peace is strength, I'm the strongest man in the world, I'm the baddest man in the world, and so he's going to say, no, we got our butts kicked, I'm going to do everything the Iranians said I have to do.
No.
This isn't a real story. What this is a continuation of the Israeli game of trying to bring down the Iranian regime. You know what happened this morning when the story broke? Mm-hmm. The streets of the Iranian cities today are filled with hundreds of thousands of people, demonstrators, not saying death to Khomeini, saying do not negotiate.
Yeah.
The Iranian people will not allow this to happen. I've spoke to an Iranian journalist and said, we will rip our government apart if they negotiate with the Americans. There's so much hatred for Americans right now.
But you're onto something here, because what's interesting is I was there, and there was a lot of people in the government, and a lot of the people who live in Iran who were angry at their government, and they should be angry at their government. Their economy sucks. It's horrible. And in many ways, the government had not handled a lot of things well. And I talked to government officials, and I said, you guys have made a lot of mistakes. They go, I know we have. You're right. But it wasn't to the point where it was out of control. That sentiment now has depreciated. As a matter of fact, you don't see that so much. No. The people who were angry at the government are now less angry at the government because of what the United States has done. Am I wrong?
So many people have died because of this war that Iran did not start. Iran, did not want this war. So many people have died. So much damage has been done that the Iranian people have crossed a threshold where they're saying the sacrifice has already been made. So don't disgrace the sacrifice. You have Israel on the ropes. Get Israel down, get America out, and then and only then can you begin to discuss. But any compromise will be bad. And that's why I don't believe the Iranian government's doing it. This is an Israeli disinformation campaign designed to create tension within Iran, and it's succeeding.
Yeah. Well, Israel's kind of trying to help Mr. Trump not look ridiculous, because in the last couple of days, he has said a lot of conflicting things. I mean, the Gulf is open, but the Gulf is closed. We're sending in the Marines, but we're not going to have boots on the ground. I don't want to talk to the Iranians, but the Iranians want to talk to me. No, wait, I'm sending Witkoff to talk to them. I mean, all this conflicting information, what are we to take away from this?
Well, if we look at it in a broader sense, if you elect me, I will not go to war with Iran or in the Middle East. So what we're seeing from both from a broad perspective and then from a micro perspective here is the same thing. And that is Donald Trump seems to say whatever needs to be said in a given hour or minute, and then he changes it quickly. Again, what did we talk about? The issue of confidence, the issue of trust has completely evaporated. I don't know how anyone in the world could negotiate with the United States other than one of those old money in hand deals. You're going to have the money up front in order to get a deal.
Scott, this is a big deal for you because you're a Marine, and this really means something to you. When your commander tells you, I need you to go over there and do something, because there is an imminent threat to your family or my family or your country, that's a serious command that you're receiving. I want you to take a listen to what Joe Kent told Tucker about whether or not the United States whether or not an imminent threat even existed prior to this war as a reason for us going in. This is cut one, if you could, Gene, take it.
Welcome to the new generation of web creation, where words can launch a business, while you control every detail. The generation always adapting, without missing a beat.
I think this is key. I mean, this would be more challenging to explain had the Secretary of State, the President, and the Speaker of the House not come out and said that we conducted this attack at this time because the Israelis were about to do so. So that takes away the argument that there was an imminent threat, as in Iran was planning to attack us immediately. That just simply did not exist.
Yeah, so he said that, and then Rubio came out and basically said the same thing. As a Marine, what do you make of that?
Well, to be honest, as a Marine, it just doesn't matter. The two battalions are getting ready to deploy, 3-5 and 3-1. We're talking, Dark Horse and the Thundering Third. These are Marine battalions with great histories. We obey orders, lawful orders.
Yeah.
The issue of whether or not there's imminent threat, this is a question of Congress in response to War Powers Act, meaning if the president's going to bypass Congress, there must be an imminent threat that necessitates rapid action. First of all, there's nothing rapid about the deployment of Marine Expeditionary Unit.
Yeah.
We have ships sailing across. These Marines are singularly focused on accomplishing the mission that they're going to be given to close with and destroy the enemy through firepower maneuver. Not a single Lance Corporal is sitting there going, was there an imminent threat or not? What he's worried about is what's going to happen to the Marine on his left and on his right. And that's the sad thing about this. We have these loyal Americans that are ready to give their life. They've been training for this mission. And we have to ensure that before we send them across the beach, that it's a mission worthy of the sacrifice they will be making. That, what we're doing in Iran right now is not worth a single drop of American blood. And yet we have 4,500 of the finest Americans willing to lay their lives down on the line because they're being ordered to do so. We have to make sure that that order is justifiable.
But here's the thing, guys. I think to a certain extent, even a Marine would start to lose a little bit of confidence in his messenger when they keep seeing conflicting signals, equipment that perhaps doesn't work. Let me give you an example. This is the Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier, supposedly one of the most state-of-the-art, incredible ships ever made. And this thing essentially has been falling to pieces. And it got to the point where the stories that are coming out is that it was sabotaged by its own crew because they were just sick and tired of being out at sea and nothing on the ship worked, including the toilets, because they used vacuum toilets instead of regular toilets, which apparently are great on planes, but they don't work on ships. We'll show you first the video of the ship. Put the video up of the ship so folks can see what this thing looks like. It's the most sophisticated aircraft carrier reportedly in the whole world. And now this is the report that's coming out. This is 3A. This is the report that's coming out all over the world now about what's going on with this ship. Let's play that.
A $13 billion flagship and nearly daily sewage breakdowns below deck. Sailors work 19-hour shifts to keep 650 toilets running. Many crew members are angry, one admits.
Fire on board the USS Gerald R. Ford started in the ship's main laundry spaces. 600 sailors are without beds. More than 200 sailors were treated for smoke inhalation.
Some serious problems with their sewage plumbing. So the best American warship that came, the American soldiers had a tough time going to the toilet.
One sailor on board the Ford told the Journal that many crew members are angry and upset, with some saying they want to leave the Navy at the end of the deployment. The sailor said she was strongly considering quitting herself.
There's more stories like this, but, as Americans, we're looking at this and we're thinking, what the hell's the world going to be thinking of us as what used to be the most dominant power in the world? And, we can't get toilets to work on a ship. Thoughts?
Well, I'll just quickly say, have you ever been below decks in a Marine amphibious ship? We live tightly compartmented life. That probably smells great compared to the smell that's there. And Marine sergeants would find a way to do PT in the sewage to make the Marine stuffer.
But what are the optics of this? The
optics are horrible for the Navy.
Yeah.
Horrible for the Navy, horrible for the United States military. This is the most advanced ship in the world. supposed to be.
Yeah.
But it's not designed to fight a war. It's designed to appease a politician. It's designed to appease a defensive. Somebody in the Navy shipbuilding business said, let's upgrade so that we look good, so we can charge more, et cetera. This is about making money for people. Now it deployed.
Yeah, this vacuum toilet system, apparently everybody who's now looking at it saying, who in the hell put that in there? That doesn't work on boats. There's no pressure. And once one goes down, the whole system goes down, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And so now you've got, this, it's not just that. This was, remember, they did away with steam catapults and went with electric catapults that don't work. Everything about this ship doesn't work. It's a horrible ship. It's a lemon. And then they send it on the longest deployment possible. So you start demoralizing the troops. And this is where, now here's where you're right. The moment you give anybody in the military a chance to sit back and reflect, see, they should be launching planes. The only thing those sailors should be thinking about is the launching and recovery in airplanes, not about politics. They shouldn't have time to watch TV. They should be launching planes, preparing ordnance, doing their mission.
They say they're bored.
Yeah. Well, they're bored because they're not doing anything.
Yeah, they've been, it started off the coast of Venezuela, and they've been out there floating around all this time. Can I give you another example since we're on this thing about what's going on with the military? Here's another one that's a bit of a shocker. This is the famous F-35, what Fidel Castro called the el avión invisible, the invisible plane that the Yankees have, right? F-35. This thing has never ever been struck by enemy missile ever before. And here it is. This is an F-35 getting hit apparently by an Iranian missile, of all things. Talk about making news. Do we have this shot? Let's see if we can put this up. This is cut 6, by the way. Here it is. You've seen this, right, Garland?
Yes.
I mean, this is what most people would have called impossible, and we're seeing it before our very eyes, just like we're seeing a Patriot system and a THAAD system that's also not working as we were told it was supposed to work. What is going on, and what is the message that's being sent around the world?
Well, I think there's something important to look at here. $13 billion. My understanding is that's right around what Iran spends for their military budget. So that's one ship.
I mean, 13, how much, what's it that?
The cost of the
F-35.
Yeah, they 13, 20 billion, whatever it is. So what we're seeing, additionally, these planes are like $120 to $170 million each. So what we're seeing is boondoggles. What we're seeing is corporations through money laundering and influence, political influence, who are able to make astronomical profits from the military-industrial complex. And here's the reality.
Which would be fine if it worked.
Right. Well, and here's the reality. They could put out a cardboard picture of a plane or a cardboard picture of a ship for all it matters to them. They just want to make the profit. They're making the profit. One of the other things that's important
is this conversation we have a lot. We've had this conversation a lot, you and I, about the military-industrial complex being more important to our Congress and to our president than the soldiers.
Yeah, one of the things that people need to know, I found out when I was working on Capitol Hill, what these companies will do, rather than make that plane or that ship in one place, they'll make a little part of it in every congressional district, so they can go to every member of Congress and say, we're putting jobs there. So we see the end result of this money laundering. We see the end result of a system that is not designed to make effective weapons. It's designed to make as much money as possible.
But I've never seen so many cases of this. I mean, think about this for a minute. So the GCC countries, right? I'm talking about Bahrain and UAE and Saudi Arabia and Oman and all these countries are depending on the United States by having military installations there. And the promise is, we will take care of you. We're going to protect you. Nothing is ever going to happen to you. And these systems that we're putting here, these THAAD systems and these Patriot systems, they are so highly effective. It's incredible. Well, according to the reporting that's coming out of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, is that they're only knocking down about 5% of the rockets and missiles that are being sent by Iran. So are they not working? And now we have this. I'm going to show you something. Look at this. This is cut number, hold on, let me put my glasses on so you can see. This is cut number 2, Gene, a Patriot missile that apparently misfired. Watch this. 32 people have been injured. I'm sure some of them are going to die because it's serious injuries. This is a Patriot missile in Bahrain that apparently either went the wrong way, missed its target. I don't know. Scott, you can talk to this. And we're seeing a lot of cases of this where the THAAD and the Patriot aren't working as well as we were told they were supposed to work. What is going on again?
Rick,
what does it mean?
In January of 1991, I was in Riyadh when we were struck by Iraqi Scud missiles. And I went to the top I was the Scud missile guy, so I'm like, I want to see what Scuds look like. Yeah. So I went to the top of my housing area. There was a Patriot battery nearby. The first two missiles that cycled out popped up and flew straight over my head, just like that, and impacted in the desert over here. The Patriot missile did more damage to the city of Riyadh than Iraqi Scuds did. Patriot did more damage to Tel Aviv than Iraqi Scuds did. The Patriots malfunction all the time because they're bad technology.
Yeah.
It's technology that's derived from a 1970s system that the Army, we're talking about defense industry, wanted to make money. So instead of designing something new, they took something old, added bells and whistles. It didn't work then. It doesn't work now. It's a bad system.
Well, where was the reporting on that? Professor Ted Postal told me the same thing that you just told me. He said, I've been warning the U.S. Congress and anybody who will listen to me, including members of the media, that we need to raise serious questions about the Patriot missile until we get to a point where we really need it. Well, here we are now. And you're telling me this because you know and you're an insider. But the average person out there, I didn't know that the Patriots were so fallible.
Let me make another point back, get to the F-35. The F-35, its radar system has a Block 4 software update that's supposed to be in. It's an update that allows the F-35 to function to maximum effectiveness in an air-to-ground mode.
Yeah.
When we started this war, we kept all our aircraft away from Iranian air defenses, and we used joint standoff weapons. So the F-35 didn't penetrate Iranian airspace. It launched these weapons. Now, we've cycled through those. We don't have any more left. We've used them all. Cruise missiles. So now the F-35 has to come in closer to drop its ordnance. But because we have a software malfunction, the F-35 now is to operate in an envelope it wasn't designed to operate in. You want to ask why the Iranians were able to shoot it down? Because the F-35 is flying where it shouldn't be flying. Where it's flying right now, its stealth technology doesn't do it any good. It's being visually acquired by Iranians who are able to visually guide a missile in and hit it. So the Iranians are using the most basic technology to take down an aircraft that is most advanced technology because our military defense industry failed that pilot.
Do you know what I'm thinking as I hear you saying this, that we have not caught up with the type of warfare that exists today, that we're still making, and I'll give you an example. I'm just going to stand up for a minute. I'm going to stand up for a minute, Gene. I know you told me to walk slow when I do this, so I'm going to back up and go over here. Look over here at the Strait of Hormuz, right? You see the Strait of Hormuz? I heard the Secretary of Defense or Secretary of War, Mr. Hegseth, say the other day that we're going to be fine there because we've knocked out the Iranian Navy, he said, and our Navy is superior and they'll be able to stop anybody from the Iranian side who tries to shoot down tankers or block the Strait of Hormuz. But then you talk to people who really know about this kind of stuff, and they'll tell you, we don't need to be worried about the Iranian Navy. What we need to be worried about are rockets that are going to be shot from anywhere inside this area of Iran right here. So the question isn't one about the Iranian Navy. The question is about some other kind of weaponry that they're going to use, right? Yeah, go ahead.
Do you mind if I walk carefully with you?
No, go ahead. You don't get too close because these guys are...
The ships come in this way, go right around that tip. Right. To come out, they have to come up, and they actually sail between two Iranian-controlled islands. That's the only exit channel. So you're going right between two islands where they have the missiles on them. See that coastline there?
Yeah.
Those are mountains. If you take a look at the video as the ships go by, the mountains, everything's dug in right here. There's a brigade here called the RF Brigade, 4 battalions that they're not ships. They have the missiles. They've been trained for 20 years to defend this strait. We're going to come in with 4 amphibious ships.
Right.
All right. As they come in, they won't make it past here. They'll get sunk here, We knew this in 2019.
They'll get sunk here because
of the other missiles. And we knew this in 2019. The Commandant of the Marine Corps, General Berger, issued the Commandant's guidance. And he said, we can't fight this war anymore. We put all our Marines on one ship. And as we get close in, we're going to get sunk. So we're not even going to, this is the island they want to take.
Yeah.
The Marines aren't even going to get here. before they all die.
That's fascinating. And we can come back here now because here's the point that comes out of all this. The stories we're being told about what we might be able to do, we're not going to be able to do, Garland.
Yeah, because here's the other part. War is not just about technology. There are other factors. What are we talking about now? We're talking about the terrain. Well, it's mountainous, so they can hide all kinds of, even artillery, as thin as that, the Strait of Hormuz are. They could literally hit ships with artillery.
And this is where the rubber meets the road, right? Because what I think is happening right now, you guys tell me if I'm full of crap on this one. What I think is happening right now is the realization that the Iranians control the game.
Yes.
Because they're deciding how long the Strait of Hormuz stays closed. And we can't stop them from making that decision, as Scott just showed why that's the case. And if we can't stop them from controlling the Strait of Hormuz, it's kind of like game over right now. Trump has to find a way, our president has to find a way to open the Strait of Hormuz. And to do that, he needs to negotiate or talk and say pretty please to the Iranians.
Again, well, yes, because what we're looking at is a country, the United States, trying to project power, 5,000 or 6,000 miles from its shores, which means Iran has geographical advantages that cannot be overcome. There's certain things you can't. I don't care what technology.
So how does somebody not think of this before we got into this? I do not understand. This is the frustrating part of this. For me, again, as an American, I'm thinking, I am a citizen of a country that supposedly has the most sophisticated military system anywhere in the world, and nobody in the Pentagon said, "Hey, we can't do this because if they close the Strait of Hormuz, there's no way we're going to be able to stop them from unclosing it."
Well, everybody in the Pentagon said that.
Yeah,
there's not a person in the Pentagon that didn't say that.
So then why did we do it?
Because Pete Hegseth came in and said, "We won't have to do that." The Israelis have told me that they're going to kill Khamenei on day one. We're going to come in with the most massive air power ever seen. We're going to pick 1,000 points on the ground, Rick. And what I'm trying to tell you here is that the numbers of targets weren't because they were good targets. It was because we wanted to hit 1,000 points on the ground a day for a period of time to create the impression of American invincibility. We kill Khamenei, we hit 1,000 points of targets on the ground, and the Iranians quit. And that way we don't have to do any of this. And yet, just so you understand, one of those 1,000 points was a girls' school that should never have been struck.
Yeah, I know.
We struck hospitals, the whole thing. This is the most criminally minded war plan in the history of war plans.
Is it criminal or stupid or both?
Criminal. No, it's first of all, when you're the Secretary of Defense and you're required by we have a Law of Warfare Act. If you violate the Geneva Conventions grossly, there's a death penalty.
Yeah.
We have a manual of the manual of the law warfare manual.
Mm-hmm.
We had a directive from 2023 that created a unit that screened targets to make sure we didn't hit civilians. Hegseth came in and said, "I'm doing away with all the rules. I'm disbanding that unit. We're going to disregard the law warfare manual. We want increased lethality." And so when he said we're going to put 1,000 bombs on 1,000 targets a day, he was saying, "I don't care what you kill. We kill things and break things," he said. "That's what we do." There was intent, criminal intent from the very start. So this was criminal and incompetent. What I don't understand is why the JCS didn't resign en masse. This is a leadership failure on the part of the most senior military officers. And now they're in a situation where they're going to have to try and do something they know they can't do. If we send Marines across the beach and they die, people need to go to jail. If we send the 82nd Airborne in with the Rangers and they die, and they will die, we will not win this fight. The Iranians have been preparing for this fight for 20 years.
Yeah.
We're making it up as we go along.
Oh, and by the way, they're Persians, and it's called the Persian Gulf.
Well, how about this?
How
about this? This isn't new. In the Pacific Islands in World War II, they would bomb the beaches for literally weeks with 16-inch guns and gigantic bombers. And still, when the Marines would hit the beaches, it would be like a hornet's nest full of Japanese. So we already know that even if you bomb the beaches and do all of that, this was from World War II, that it's not going to stop the enemy when they're dug in.
Did you get a chance, and I hope I'm not putting you on, so did you get a chance to see my reporting from Iran? some of the questions.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
everything.
yeah.
You saw me sit down with Harachi a week before the bombs fell. And I sat down, I looked at him, and I finally said to him, I said, I know you really want to negotiate this. I know, he told me, I'm willing to give Trump a better deal than we gave Obama. We really want to do this deal. And I got a sense that he was telling the truth. I think he's an honest guy.
Yes.
I really think he's an honest guy from the time that I spent with him. And then I said this to him. I said, what if the negotiation breaks down? What if the Americans attack? What if the U.S. and Israel attack you? He said, we will do everything that we've seen them do.
Yep.
He literally said
Yes.
to me, he said, Rick, we will hit every country in the GCC and we will hit every military installation in this area. Were they not paying attention?
But you know that
and they didn't just say it to me.
Right.
They said to everybody.
Yeah.
They wrote a letter to the UN.
The second Marine unit that's coming in, the Thundering Third. I mean, I love my Marines, so every unit
Is that what
has
they're called,
tradition.
the Thundering Third?
3-1, Thundering Third. But they are leaving their ports 3 weeks early.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if you've ever been deployed, there's preparation, there's lead up time. This means that there's training that isn't getting done, logistics isn't done. So as they're moving, they're going to be doing things 3 weeks early. This is not a planned event. This is a panicked event. Everything we're doing right now is a panicked reaction to the fact that the Iranians had a plan that they stuck to. Iraqi told you everything they were going to do. There's been no deviation at all.
Mm-hmm.
They've done everything because
Exactly.
they have
Yeah.
a plan.
Yeah.
We, on the other hand, have been changing our plan every day for 4 weeks now. And it just shows that we don't know what we're doing. And this is what makes it criminal, because we're going to put Marines across a beach when we don't have a plan for them. We don't know what we're going to do. Why are we going across it? Kharg Island is a nothing joint. You see, the president says, I've been told 90% of the Iranian oil comes from that. Now, but not now. It'll come from somewhere else. Kharg Island is meaningless. The Iranians will simply let you come in. Look how close it is to the shore. They're just going to kill everybody that lands there.
But you know what's really weird about this? Here I am, the three of us, Americans, who just happen to be in Moscow. It's a wonderful, beautiful city, by the way. If anybody ever gets a chance to come out here, super clean, and there's very little homelessness. There's no drug problems, so it's cool. It's got its own problems too, by the way, like every other city. But here we are having this conversation about the realities of this, and God, I want it to work out as an American, hopefully for both sides. I don't want to see anybody die. But I come from a country where I watch the news and I see two things. A, the so-called thought leaders, our Congress, our politicians, are not telling people the stories that you and I are, the three of us are talking about here. And neither is CNN or Fox News. They're cheerleading this war. Like, we're winning and we're going to kick their ass and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And I'm thinking, that's not smart and it's certainly not responsible. Here's Rick Scott. Cut 7, if you got this for us, Gene. This is Rick Scott saying, we had to do this because if we didn't do this, we were just 3 minutes away from being nuked. Watch.
They were getting close to a nuclear weapon. They were building ballistic missiles. If they had the ability to drop them in the United States, they would have. They put our troops are at risk. I don't want to be destroyed by a nuclear weapon. I don't want to be destroyed by a ballistic missile. I don't want my family destroyed or any family in the United States. The president's doing the right thing.
Everybody knows that what he's saying is bull crap. Everybody. I mean, the vast majority of Americans still even know this, despite the fact that they're being fed stories like this on, I think that was CNN, where that lady works or whatever. So it's just, I'll tell you, as an American, it frustrates me. I don't care what decisions we make. I just want them to be made earnestly with correct information, Garland.
And this is exactly what they did in Iran. Exactly. Don't let them, the evidence that they have a nuclear weapons program be a mushroom cloud. Condi Rice and Dick Cheney. They're playing the same game over again.
How can they do that, though? You're absolutely right. It's the same language. They have weapons of mass destruction, and tomorrow your son will die.
But that worked because they could easily dominate Iraq. And then now it makes it even more dangerous, because when no one knows how bad things are going, when no one knows this isn't working out and we're running out of weapons, etc., they get even more panicked when they see the situation going bad. And panic, what we see is it's panic. Panic's not a plan. Panic's what you do when a plan doesn't work.
This is the guy who told the world. You're looking at him. Scott Ritter is the first guy who told the world it's not true. They don't have weapons of mass destruction in the case of Iraq. For you to watch this playing out again, it's just got to be, I mean, you just want to hit your head against the wall, I bet.
Yeah, but you can't. I mean, I respect you and I respect this show, so I keep my language clean.
Yeah, thank you.
I am a person that can anger very quickly, and I'm a Marine. This is beyond frustrating, because what this is an indictment of the American people. It's an indictment. Can you fool me once? Shame on me.
Yeah.
Fool me twice, as George W. Bush said, won't get fooled again. But the
Right.
point is, the American people are being fooled again. It's not about being fooled. Being fooled means that you are earnestly trying to learn things. The American people are asleep at the wheel.
Yeah.
We're no longer functioning as a constitutional republic. We have ceased to function the way our founding fathers want us. We have a man who literally said, I am a dictator. A man who says, I don't care about the rule of law. I'm guided by my personal morality. A man who contradicts himself on a daily basis. And the American people aren't going to wake up until there's higher gas prices. They're not going to cry over dead Marines. They're not going to cry over dead soldiers.
Yeah.
But they will cry when they have to pay $4.50 a gallon.
You know, you're right. Lately, I've been watching the coverage. We all do. I'm sure the three of us are constantly watching, even the stuff that we don't like Fox and CNN, the way they're covering this. But you're right. You know what I see people talking about? The market. What effect this is going to have on oil, and should I buy more oil? What's it going to do to Brent? What's it going to do to crude? What's going on with the Dow and the S&P 500? These are the conversations. Is my gas bill going to go up? These are the conversations that people are having in America. I agree with him. I think it's somewhat irresponsible. How about those 120 little girls who died? Who's speaking for them?
Well, I can inject some positivity into it, though, and that is that we do have an alternative media space now, people such as you, and then people such as us who are on, various platforms. So we do have an alternative media space. So I can say that that alternative media space is growing, and that kind of makes the mainstream media more desperate. And so they're putting out this propaganda that I guess it works on people who are struggling because they can barely make ends meet and they don't have really time to research. But the alternative media space is growing, and we're seeing an increasing number of people who are starting to ask these legitimate questions.
You mentioned Hegseth and some of the conflicting statements that have been made. Here's an example of the president of the United States lately, who's been hard to figure out where he's going. Oftentimes, he's trying to explain that it's the Iranians who've been reaching out to him. They're calling us. And so I have Witkoff talking to him. Meanwhile, again, the Iranians are saying, no, that's not true. We're not talking. And by the way, as far as we're concerned, we're going to continue fighting because you attacked us and we don't trust you to negotiate. So that's what the Iranians are saying. Here's Trump, just within the last 24 hours at the airport, talking about this very issue. And listen to what he says when he's asked this question by the reporter about who he's actually talking to. Which Iranian are you talking to? Listen to what he says.
With Iran, a top person. Then it's a little tough. They've wiped out everybody. Mr. President, I don't want him to be killed. Okay, I don't want him to be killed.
He says they have wiped out everybody. There's nobody left to talk to. They have wiped out everybody. I'm so confused. Maybe one of you guys can help me. Didn't the United States kill and assassinate all their negotiators?
No, the initial strikes against Tehran were done by the Israelis. The decapitation aspect of this mission, this joint operation, was the Israeli side that was doing it. American intelligence helped. But the president.
So is that what he means?
He means the Israelis killed them, and I don't want to name him but we know who he's talking about. He's talking about the Speaker of Parliament. That's the person that is allegedly doing this. But again, why is
that happening? Do you think?
Well, there's two reasons. One, first of all, the ignorance contained in what he said. He's talking about killing people. Iran is a nation state with institutions. Okay, the resilience from Iran doesn't come from an individual. It comes from a system that will continue to function even if you kill an individual. and we've killed them all. I know the last time I checked, Mr. President, the president of Iran was still alive. The foreign minister of Iran was still alive. The speaker of parliament was still alive. You killed one man and you killed a bunch of generals. You haven't done your decapitation, but even if you did, Iran would continue to function because they, unlike us, are a constitutional republic with systems.
What about this notion, though? If he's saying, let's take him at his word. He's saying, I want to protect this guy because I don't want the Israelis to kill him. It's not us. It's the Israelis who are killing him. And we, if I say his name, then the Israelis will kill him. Are the Israelis that powerful that the United States is afraid of the Israelis, Garland? And the United States can't control? The United States cannot control what the Israelis do, which is what that would mean if we take him at his word.
I don't necessarily trust the good cop, bad cop story. I feel like they're on the same team. I don't necessarily trust the story that Benjamin Netanyahu is completely pushing the United States around. I believe the U.S. saw this as an opportunity to take out Iran, and that way they could affect China's ability to access the oil. So I think that there is they're playing this game together, but I do think that there is a level of desperation in the White House. I think they want out. They know that it's going bad for them, particularly when it comes to domestic politics. But some people believe that there's these two separate entities. I'm one of the people that think they're working together and their stories are kind of designed.
A lot of people do.
Yeah,
a lot of people do. Again, we just have to be realistic here and let the evidence speak for itself.
Yeah.
What's taking place right now is one of the most complex strategic air campaigns ever executed in modern history. The amount of aircraft that are sorting in and sorting out. We had the tragedy of two American tankers colliding. They're colliding because we're doing refueling operations nonstop to keep these planes in. It's a joint refueling operation, meaning that the Israeli and American aircraft are being refueled by the same system. We have a joint strike plan. You don't just fly
airplanes. Can you win a war
in.
that way? Can you win a war with
the
just
only
the
way
Air Force?
No, you can't win it you can't win a war with just the Air Force. But what I'm trying to say is, you can collapse the Desert Storm was about a strategic air campaign designed to collapse Iraq's ability to resist over time. We had done a better job studying Iraq. With Iran, 4 times bigger, they've been preparing for 20 years.
Yeah.
We haven't done a good job. Like I said, we're bombing points on the ground. We're not bombing targets that mean something. But this is a joint operation planned by the Israelis and the United States. This is not they're doing their thing, we're doing our thing. This is a carefully coordinated military operation where the Israelis and the Americans are sitting in the same command space, coordinating their airstrikes, their targets, refueling. You can't have Israeli aircraft come in and come out and need to be refueled when you have an American packet. So it has to be phased in. As they come out, they get refueled, we come in. And it's all done in coordination, close coordination.
So when you're saying Israel, you're saying U.S., and when you're saying U.S., you're saying Israel.
Right. Yep.
We've taken the day of stuff, and we've talked about where we are as far as the theater is concerned right now, and we've talked a little bit about the politics. Let's end up with this as we get to the conclusion of this really great conversation with you guys, because you're both so smart and you're so nice to have this conversation with you. And I'm sure people all over the world are looking at this and thanking you for it. But let's talk about what happens next. And that is, at some point, this is going to end. And when it's over, what's this region going to be like? And what's the United States going to be like? We always call this the hegemony, or whatever the hell that means. Hegemony means that the United States has had, and the West has had, dominion of the world for so long. Does this action by the United States, as some have indicated, devalue that hegemony? Is that part of what's going to happen next?
I think 2 things. I think the wisdom of having U.S. bases in your country is going to be revisited by many leaders. Because not only can they not protect you, they can't protect themselves, and it becomes a liability as opposed to an asset. I think the other thing
that's an important point, though.
As far as the Middle East, I think, particularly with Russia, countries who get their the significant amount of their hydrocarbons and their energy from the Middle East are going to look at it and they're going to say, I want stability. And they're going to try to diversify the areas of the world that they get hydrocarbons from and maybe go to atomic energy, et cetera, because people are going to say that's effectively a supply chain. It's a vulnerable supply chain. I have to diversify it. So I think people are going to be looking to diversify their energy worldwide dramatically as fast as they can.
Do you think those GCC states that you just mentioned who feel like they got really crappy protection are going to now be more apt to turn to China, Russia, and India, these countries who are a part of BRICS? Or
I think they have to. And Russia is going to be important if we're able to end this thing diplomatically and afterwards, because Russia has relationships, even with Israel, but they have relationships with the Gulf states and Iran. And I think if I'm running one of these Gulf states, I'm on the phone with Russia saying, you're the only ones I know that have the trust diplomatically that can work out a deal.
Yeah. Same question to you, Scott. Where do you think this leaves us?
Well, first of all, I think the United States is in a very bad situation. There is no military solution. And when you lead with the military...
There is no military solution.
There is no military solution.
Wow.
We're not going to win this war. There's nothing we could do to win. To get sufficient forces necessary to project troops on the ground would take 9 months to 13 months. And given what's going on with the price of gas and oil, we'll be bankrupt by that time. And so the United States now not only will have to retreat from the Middle East, but understand we have exhausted our supply of high-end air defense and high-end strike, meaning we can't do this anywhere else. We can't do it we've weakened it. We've emptied everything. It's going to make it prohibitively expensive to rebuild. So America's going to have to go through a complete rethinking of how we project power around the world. But on the economy of this, I agree with Garland that already you see, for instance, Russia stepping in and filling the contract. And energy isn't about short-term contracts. Energy is about long-term contracts. And Russia's in there filling the gap. But even if we got the Strait of Hormuz flowing, Qatar, one of the top gas producers, 17% of their production capability is destroyed. It's going to take years to bring it up on.
Yep, it's gone.
Kuwait has drawn down their oil fields to maintain them, to avoid destruction. To bring them back up is going to take weeks and months. That's energy that won't be available on the market at a time right now when people are desperate. Understand, this isn't about just keeping 3 square meals on the table. People now around the world have been denied meals for days. Australia's out of diesel. Other nations, South Korea is now net rationing gas. These people are starving for energy. And so, they're going to be desperate for, energy to come flowing in. And if the Middle East can't deliver it, it's going to come from other resources. I think this is the end of those Gulf Arab monarchies who have lived so long based upon the money they make selling energy. You're going to see them go bankrupt fiscally, and then everybody will recognize their moral bankruptcy as well.
Colossal mistakes cause serious consequences.
Yep.
And I think the three of us agree, at least at this point, unless something changes, this is a colossal mistake.
Cultfigga. Follow me.